Thank you, Chair. Chair Acefa?
Yes.
Deputy Secretary Shireen D'Souza on behalf of Secretary Jerry Blumenfeld, California EPA.
Here.
Nicole Capretz, public
Here.
member. Secretary Lourdes Castro Ramirez of the California BCSH.
Here.
Secretary Wade Crowfoot, California Natural Resources Agency.
Here.
Mike Flagg, public member.
Here.
Virginia Jameson, Deputy Secretary on behalf of Secretary of Food and Agriculture Karen Ross.
Here.
Deputy Secretary Darwin Musavi on behalf of Acting Secretary of California State Transportation Agency Elise Knopf.
Here.
Chancellor Juan Sanchez Munoz, public member.
Present.
Deputy Director Mark Starr on behalf of Dr. Secretary Mark Alley of the California Health and Human Services Agency.
Present.
We have quorum.
Great. So we'll jump to item 3, which is the approval of the November 16 meeting minutes. As you know, members do not need to be, do not have to have attended these meetings to vote on the minutes and adoption, but may abstain if they choose so. So we will now, so we'll first take public comments, Matt.
Yeah, so I'm going to go through just our, thank you, Lois, perfect.
Great.
The instructions for public comment today. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Chair Acefa, and thanks to everyone joining us. Joining by Zoom or via phone or by tuning in on YouTube where the meeting is being live streamed. I'm here to provide some information to help guide us all through the processes for this remote meeting, which have been designed with the intention of maximizing access by members of the public. For those joining webinar via Zoom or by phone, please note that your microphone is automatically muted when you join. In order to minimize the risk of background noise, we ask that you please not unmute your phone yourself. For those joining online via Zoom, please note that the webinar platform doesn't enable video for attendees, so we will not be able to see you. If you need technical assistance during the meeting or have a question about the meeting process, there are a few ways to get in touch with us. If you're using the online Zoom webinar, the best way is using the Q&A function, which several members of the SGC team will be monitoring. If you have joined by phone and you have access to email, please email sgc.info@sgc.ca.gov. If you do not have access to email, you may call or text us using the phone number 916-634-3359. If you plan to make public comment, you must be joining the meeting via Zoom, either through the webinar or by phone. So to make public comment, you can visit us online at sgc.ca.gov/meetings. That's plural meetings, and complete the public comment form linked there. You'll need to complete separate forms for each item on which you wish to speak. You may complete a form at any time during the meeting. When the chair when the chair opens the public comment period for your item, you will need to read the names of everyone who has submitted a form for that item. When you hear your name in that list, please raise your hand. To do this online in the Zoom webinar, click Raise Hand under the Participants menu. Find that at the bottom of your screen. To raise your hand by phone, press *9. When it's your turn to speak, a member of our team will unmute your microphone. If you are online, you will see a window pop up alerting you that the host is unmuting you. You will need to click the option to approve unmute. After that, you can begin your comment. If you're on the phone, you will hear a recorded message alerting you that your line is unmuted. Please begin your comment after you hear the recorded message. Each speaker will have a maximum of 2 minutes to make their remarks. If you're online, you'll see a timer pop up on your screen. Please monitor that so you wrap up your remarks accordingly. Whether you are online or on the phone, you will be notified when your time is up. After that, we will mute your microphone. You do not need to take any additional action once we've muted your microphone. And lastly, members of the council, a housekeeping note to you all. To notify the chair that you'd like to enter the discussion, simply use the raise hand function in Zoom, and we'll call on you in turn. After you speak, please click the button to lower your hand. Thank you all very much for your participation, and I will hand it back to Chair Asefa.
Great, thanks, Emily. So on the November 16 meetings, is there a motion and a second to approve the meeting minutes?
Moved or second?
Moved or seconded too.
Sorry, did Secretary Munoz motion and second by Wade and Secretary Ramirez. Matt, could you do it?
Okay,
You
I
need
will call the
the
roll. Chair Asefa,
yes.
Deputy Secretary D'Souza,
Yes.
Councilmember Cabretz,
Yes.
Secretary Castro Ramirez,
Yes.
Secretary Crowfoot,
Yes.
Councilmember Flad,
Yes.
Deputy Secretary Jameson,
Yes.
Deputy Secretary Musavi,
Yes.
Councilmember Munoz,
Yes.
Deputy Director Starr.
Yes.
Unanimous, the motion passes.
Great. I'm now looking forward to this next item, and I would like to introduce item 4, which is the council member update. This month, we are going to discuss opportunities for council collaboration within the governor's blueprint for 2022-2023, which was released on January 10th. This will give us significant opportunity for collaboration in the way the budget was pulled together, connecting a lot of issues and that all of us are trying to address. His 2022-23 budget outlines historically significant and cross-cutting investments in climate, housing, transportation, equity, healthcare, and more. Given the scale and significance of this historic budget, I would like to invite my fellow council members to take this opportunity to highlight a few key budget priorities that, one, provide opportunities for future collaboration across our agencies, and then second, reflect the council's shared priorities. We've organized this in 3 key buckets around the budget. 1, reconnecting communities, 2, climate smart land use, and then 3, housing as a climate strategy. So we have those buckets, and you could speak to any one of them, but I would, maybe start with reconnecting communities with CALSTA and AHSC primarily. If you would highlight some of the opportunities for collaboration, but also highlight and reflect on some of the shared priorities. Who would like to go first?
I'm happy to start, Chair Asefa, if that works for you.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Darwin.
Well, thank you for raising this, Chair, and providing the opportunity for us to talk about the investments in the transportation package that relate to reconnecting communities, and that I think all of us here can help collaborate on. So as you mentioned, the blueprint put out by the governor earlier this month includes numerous investments. I think the one I wanted to highlight here today is as part of the $9.1 billion transportation package that focuses on increasing transportation options for Californians through rail, transit, active transportation, and equity-related and safety-related investments. There's specifically a $150 million investment for a new program called the Reconnecting Communities Highways to Boulevards pilot program, that we're really excited about here at CalSTA. So this proposal was first called for in CAPDI, our Climate Action Plan for Transportation Infrastructure that many of you are familiar with. And it received strong stakeholder support through the creation of that plan. This investment also would allow us to be competitive for a new federal program that was created through the IIJA, the new infrastructure bill, that is called the Reconnecting Communities pilot program, which provides funding for removing, retrofitting, or mitigating existing transportation facilities that create barriers to mobility access for economic opportunity. So here in California, we have the opportunity to create a program much like the one at the federal government level to help leverage those funds and to position California to be competitive for those dollars. The Reconnecting Communities Highways to Boulevards program, as part of the governor's budget, will improve equity, remove transportation barriers by investing in the conversion or capping of key underutilized highways in order to transform them into multimodal corridors that serve existing residents and develop affordable housing options, as well as complete streets features, particularly in disadvantaged communities. As we all know and have discussed in this body before, past transportation decisions have often put up barriers and divided communities and amplified racial inequalities, particularly in our Black and Brown neighborhoods here in California. So we see this program as a key opportunity to work together to start to repair some of those past harms. We're excited to work with Caltrans, HCD, OPR, SGC, and other interested agencies and stakeholders to develop this program. I think it's a great opportunity for the SGC to really come together and take an all of government approach to think about the various aspects of what this program can really unlock and transform in our communities. Excited to get to share it with you all today, and we'll keep everyone updated as discussions on this proposal unfold in the coming months. With that, I'll turn it back to you, Chair.
Great, thank you. And those are great opportunities and timely, especially and a lot of the interconnected issues that we're looking at, and incredible work from CalSTA on creating great places and connections. A lot of the policy around housing opportunities all intersect with this work. Anyone else?
Do you want to?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I'd be glad to jump in. We use the word historic a lot in government to describe different things that get done. But I have to say, having been involved in state government almost a decade, I believe that this climate, proposed budget of the governor's is truly historic. Consider these facts: the $15 billion commitment that the governor and the legislature made last year, combined with the $22.5 billion proposal of the governor this year, would take almost $40 billion of our state budget and put it towards climate action, both to combat climate change and reduce pollution in ways that are equitable, and to protect both people and nature from the impacts of climate change. So number one is just the scale of resources. The second, I think, is the orientation towards equity, which has been present in many climate programs in the past, but not across all of our climate investments the way that it is in this governor's proposed budget. And then the third is the integrated nature of it. Many of us are used to the deep dive summary that we give of the governor's proposed budget after he gives this budget address. And in the past, that's included a few secretaries. Well, this year, the overview of the climate budget after the governor's address included 10 secretaries and department heads, reflecting just how well distributed all of these climate investments are in housing and education and public health, workforce development. Remarkable. And so I think that, Sam, what you point out is just us elevating the importance to work together across our agencies. This is the moment to shed any silos that have existed in the past that prevents us from actually truly creating these comprehensive programs. I'm really excited about partnership with CalSTA on the part of its budget that's focused on climate resilient transportation infrastructure, to work with many of you on the climate research budget that's focused on UC and CSU and our education system, workforce development and training for this next generation of workers. Sam, the funding that you and New Antara will be directing through OPR on regional climate resilience planning and capacity building. I mean, it is truly remarkable. It's an inflection point. And I think that this SGC has never been more important, because this is the one place that many of our agencies come together in a public venue to talk about the shared work. So I can't say how energized I am about the work. It's daunting to think about the level of integration we need to achieve, but now is the moment.
Wade, I couldn't agree more. It is mind-boggling. I would encourage everybody to actually read the full package of the budget. I know it's a lot of pages. There are some summaries. It is not only historic, but I think it is, in the work that all of our agencies do, once in a lifetime opportunity to take advantage of this incredible aligned resources. So yeah, I too am excited to be working across our agencies on this issue.
If I may, Sam, I'd like to jump on this, because I love Wade's energy and the way that he synthesized the three sort of pillars, right, that are behind the governor's California blueprint budget. From a housing perspective, housing is climate, right? Or housing is very much connected to addressing the climate challenges in our communities and our neighborhoods. And the California blueprint makes that very clear. I am very excited and looking forward to continuing to work with, as Wade mentioned, really across state agencies and departments to be more nimble, to be more integrated, and to be more thoughtful about how we co-invest in communities to really further housing opportunities, to address climate change, to increase housing affordability, which we know is an ongoing challenge for our state, and also to create stronger, more resilient and integrated neighborhoods that allow for residents and families and elders and children to be able to live in a neighborhood that is walkable, live in a neighborhood that has good access to transportation, live in a neighborhood that has good access to healthcare, to banks, to groceries, to schools, to the things that we know are vital in neighborhoods. And so that's what's behind the overall sort of housing as climate strategy within the governor's California blueprint budget. I will mention just a few other points here. From a housing perspective, I'm excited about how these proposals build on the momentum of the California Comeback Plan. You'll recall that this year, the governor approved, and the legislature, of course, supported $22 billion investment in housing and homelessness over 2 years. We're very laser focused on implementing those investments, driving more housing production, and also looking at a greater integration between housing and health and human services. In the California blueprint, one specific investment that I'd like to call out for the purposes of today's discussion is there's $1 billion over 2 years to reduce the impact of climate change, to increase housing affordability, to further housing options, again, all leading to creating more resilient and sustainable communities. That includes, the $1 billion includes $500 million for the infill infrastructure program. This has been a very successful program, a very successful strategy that enables the state to unlock opportunities for affordable housing in targeted areas and community. And so, we're excited to see that there's additional funding to be able to scale and to continue supporting communities with this approach. Another element of the $1 billion is $100 million that are set aside for adaptive reuse projects. Basically, this will enable us to support projects where local communities are converting commercial buildings into residential use. Earlier, actually last year, the fourth quarter of last year, the Department of Real Estate had an opportunity to commission a study through the Turner Center that shows this as an effective strategy in our overall effort, to preserve and expand housing. And then lastly, the other exciting component of the $1 billion that's included is $100 million for excess state lands to be able to use that as an anchor to develop affordable housing. So all in all, we're very much thinking about how to leverage housing investments in a strategic and targeted way to create, stronger communities. And I thank you, Sam, for joining me when we rolled out the housing budget with our stakeholders. We had nearly 400 individuals, and I think to Wade's point, continuing to demonstrate how we're partnering and collaborating and co-investing and being out also on the ground listening to community, I think will continue to be very important as we implement these programs and bring these funds to community.
Thank you for that really well sort of rounded summary of that. I think that is the other very exciting around housing. We often look at it in isolation. It's one of the brilliant aspects of this budget is, again, connecting the dots, deciding where we build, where it makes sense, has a very direct impact on climate. It has very direct impact on transportation. It has very direct impact on access to workers, labor, in terms of where jobs and housing are located in terms of proximity. So it is really a complete plan and budget proposal. And we have that great opportunity to coordinate, especially with your office and across many of the agencies here.
I can jump in if you'd like, Mr. Chair.
Please.
And I'll add to your list health, impact on health as well. That was a nice list you put together. Obviously, from our perspective, that's a huge one. There's really a lot in the governor's budget to celebrate. We just heard about that from my council member colleagues. And there's also a lot to celebrate from a health equity perspective, from our perspective at Cal AHSC. And especially in the area of reconnecting communities, which is one of the buckets that you wanted us to chat about. So I'll focus a little bit on some of the budget proposals relevant to our agency, to health, to climate, and with the opportunity for collaboration, which is really what this is all about. And the integration that Wade alluded to, that's just inherent in this budget regarding climate change and tackling this existential crisis. In a previous council meeting, probably several months ago, I described my history with the One Health approach to solving existential and wicked problems that involve many sectors and involve the health of people, health of the environment, health of animals, quite often others. And this really is a One Health approach to climate. So we really want to complement that. I'll just mention a few things that are specific to our agency that we're very excited about. First is a one-time program to support our local health department colleagues, as well as tribes and community-based organizations to collaborate to develop regional climate and health resilience plans. So these will start off as kind of a first phase pilot on a regional basis that'll be led in each region by a couple local health departments working with tribes and CBOs, as I mentioned. There's $25 million for this, and it's a grant program that will allow us to help drive that locally. Another one is called Climate Health and Disease Monitoring, is 10 million for that to establish a monitoring program. And really this is to track the health impacts of intensified climate types of situations, climate sensitive impacts, whether it's heat related illness, it could be vector-borne diseases, could be smoke related, pollution related. There's a lot of aspects to that, and real-time monitoring. We don't have as good of information, a handle on that in many of these areas that impact health. So we're very excited about that program. We're also really excited about working with others regarding the proposal for 25,000 new community health workers in order to reduce health impacts of climate change across communities. And I think that's about a $350 million proposal to recruit, train, and certify these 25,000 new community health workers over the next 3 to 4 years. So they address not only climate health, but homelessness, dementia, and many other aspects of climate. And I really want to compliment the presenters before me, and transportation I'll start off with. We really look forward to collaborating with CalSTA and others to assure that 15 billion investments identified for CAPTI can best support public health and equity and safety by reducing the need to drive to meet daily needs and supporting all the alternative modes of transportation and making those safe. But also, as Darwin just described, the Reconnecting Communities Highways to Boulevards pilot program really will move us closer to the vision of healthy, equitable, low carbon communities. That's kind of the reason our agency is part of this council. And then just a comment, if I can, about the housing bucket. We've already touched on that, and we heard from Secretary Castro Ramirez. Really applaud the governor's housing as a climate strategy. And housing is, of course, also a health and equity strategy. So I think you've already heard and understood from the secretary that affordable, safe housing, especially in already developed areas, can reduce displacement pressures, can reduce commute time and stresses of having to live distant from where a workplace is in lower income communities, often communities of color. And also stable, affordable housing always improves health and mental health outcomes for adults and particularly children, and adverse childhood experiences are reduced. So these are all really important aspects of the budget. And then the last thing, we really appreciate the emphasis on income inequality in the governor's blueprint. And that is a part of this big picture. And those that have lower income, of course, are more susceptible to the impacts of climate change on their health and well-being. And our Secretary Galley has emphasized the need to talk about income inequality as a root cause of greenhouse gas emissions, health inequities, and transportation and housing inequities. So it all circles back to what we really know some of the root challenges are in social determinants of health and equality. There's known causal relationships between wealth inequality and low life expectancy, infant mortality, and many other health impacts, mental health and others that we're all aware of. And there's also increasing research that indicates that places with more income inequality are also less likely to successfully curb emissions sufficiently to avoid climate challenges. So that's something that has to be addressed, and gaining the trust of these communities. Growing up in unequal societies diminishes trust. And so we have to make that involvement happen and improve income equality and reduce the consumption of all of the precious resources that we have. And there are just a few other items in the budget, just quickly I'll mention, that are really relevant. I won't go into detail, but there's a proposal for community air monitoring and local real-time pollution monitoring in disadvantaged communities. That will be a huge advantage for knowing what's going on in those communities. There's urban and community forestry and urban greening funding. There's community resilience and heat program funding for community resilience centers, and of course, low-income weatherization. And that, not just weatherization, but also accelerated deployment of air conditioning, heat pumps, and low greenhouse gas potential refrigerants in communities that are particularly vulnerable to heat. So there are so many items. I probably need to stop, but we're very excited about the many strategies with the promise to address health and inequality and including reducing poverty and improving housing and reducing wealth at the top, or at least decreasing the wealth inequities and increasing the equity frameworks and resource allocation. So this budget is really a huge step in all those directions. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. Again, it points to so many interrelated issues and challenges that the state is trying to address are really highlighted and called out, and resources are allocated to this budget. One thing I would add that is it's also responsive to the crisis of the day around climate, and Mark, you mentioned extreme heat, but a lot of resources are located across our agencies around climate resiliency, adaptation. Both CNRA and California Department of Food and Agriculture will collaborate with OPR on technical assistance and capacity building, creating resiliency centers as well, again, in response to some of the climate crisis. But it is also an investment in human infrastructure as well. Significant amount of dollars are allocated across our agencies. SGC and OPR are working in collaboration, for example, with, I mentioned, with CDFA in creating resources for communities. There are similar collaboration opportunities across other areas of work around resiliency, regional climate collaboration grants, as I mentioned, adaptation. So there is so much in this package, and I think the biggest highlight is it's well thought out in terms of connecting the dots. So each of those resources leverage each other, and of all of our 7 agencies plus, our emergency respondents from fire and emergency services. So there is a lot there. I would encourage, I think, the audience and people who haven't really looked into the budget to really look at it. This is a time to hear back from you as well on those budgets. But again, in my 30-some plus career in land use planning and city planning, I have not seen any budget proposal of this magnitude, not just a scale, but how it really connects the dots. Now we have to do the work. It falls onto us and the public and regional governments as well, and cities that we coordinate with. I've said much, but I'll give others opportunity to please weigh in and provide feedback as well.
Thanks, Chair. This is Shireen D'Souza from Cal EPA, the Climate Deputy Secretary, and I'm here. I'm excited to be here on behalf of Secretary Blumenfeld today. Thanks for the opportunity to weigh in on the budget. I'll echo what colleagues have said about how incredibly groundbreaking this budget is, and it's such a clear demonstration of the administration's focus on equitable climate action. And all of the topics that colleagues have raised around housing as climate and reconnecting communities and community air monitoring. These are all topics that Cal EPA cares so deeply about and is so invested in. And we are really excited to have the opportunity to collaborate more through this new budget with all of you. And of course, since I don't think it's been brought up yet, I'll just mention the zero emission vehicle package, which we're so excited about, $10 billion, and the deep, deep focus on equity in the budget. So you see a real strong focus on the heavy duty sector, transitioning school buses, transit buses, drayage vehicles, port electrification. Transportation is, of course, the biggest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the state, and also the biggest source of the criteria pollutants that are sickening low-income communities of color all across the state. So we're really excited to have the opportunity to go deeper on the zero emission vehicle space and to work with all of you in that regard as well. I also think that there's a real need and opportunity here to ensure community members, especially disadvantaged community members, are able to access the many incentive programs in the budget. So for any of us, for me even, navigating complex bureaucratic applications or solicitations is really difficult. And even more so if you lack good access to internet or speak English as a second language or face any other number of barriers. The interagency is already doing a lot of thinking about improving access to state programs. And I know we're going to hear from Kieran and the team later today about the capacity building work. And Secretary Blumenfeld and I would like SGC to convene relevant agency partners to think through how to best ensure community members have access to the myriad programs in the climate budget. And there, you know, as we get started on that discussion, I'm sure we'll land on a suite of options and a suite of solutions that might include things like expanding access to existing web platforms like Funding Wizard or Access Clean California, or establishing policies that facilitate community participation in programs like increasing technical assistance or expanding advanced payment. That ends up being a huge barrier to a lot of community organizations that would like to participate or provide resources to community members. There's a lot of contracting barriers also that we need to examine. We would also probably identify key opportunities for cross-program coordination within the climate budget. So for example, we might identify areas where programs with similar audiences could issue joint solicitations or conduct joint workshops. And all of these we would develop a suite of solutions through discussion and then develop an implementation plan. And all of them would reduce that barrier to engagement, especially for disadvantaged communities all across the state. So throwing that out there, see if that might be something SGC could do. Thanks.
Well, thank you. Those are all really good feedback from Shireen. This is an issue that has always come up from communities, and especially community-based organizations who have a hard time going through the maze of government documents or access to grants or the process itself. And it is something I think, I do agree, I think SGC should really look into it. We'll talk about it later on the agenda around some of the thinking with the technical assistance program within SGC. But I just want to point out too, within this budget, and that's one of the reasons, one of the many reasons that the governor has proposed a new Office of Community Partnership and Strategic Communications. And one of the central essence there is how do we engage and continue to engage with community-based organizations from race and social justice lens to make sure that they have easy access to connect to state programs. And then the state actually provides some of those programs in language and meeting them where they are. So that is a critical issue in terms of structural barriers that exist, especially in the climate world as well. So I take to heart that recommendation and something that we should really look into. I know we're going too long, but I want to call out the new Deputy Secretary with CDFA, our colleague Virginia Jemson, who has joined us. I know you have your hand. First of all, welcome. I know you're not new to the state, but you're a new great addition to CDFA. Please take it on.
Thank you, Chair SF. I really appreciate that. I'm a big fan of SGC and always have been, so I feel very honored to get to participate in this body this way. I really appreciate you mentioning the resiliency centers. CDFA is also really excited to collaborate with all of you on solutions that address climate smart land use strategies like infill and land conservation. And as part of that, we're really looking forward to bringing agriculture into our urban areas through our new urban ag program. And we also have additional funding for supporting healthy eating habits for children through our farm to school programs. And then also on the outside of the city, continuing to work with our agency partners on technical assistance capacity building, as you all have mentioned, and we'll talk about that more. But particularly around furthering climate smart ag practices. We also have unprecedented funding for that kind of work. And so we're really looking forward to implementing some of the nature-based solutions we've talked about in our various documents, like soil carbon sequestration, habitat restoration, groundwater recharge, pollinator habitat. We have a new program specifically focused on that. And then another opportunity for collaboration is the multi-benefit land repurposing program as we meet our groundwater sustainability challenges. So yeah, thank you for having me, and I really appreciate the opportunity to collaborate.
Great, thank you, Virginia. We're running about 22 minutes late. I am going to get us on time as much as possible. So why don't we, unless there's anyone, I don't see any hands, so I'm gonna move to taking public comments at this time. Emily?
Thank you, Chair Acefa. And just so you all are aware, we actually do not have public comment for this agenda item, so we can hopefully accelerate and get back on time. Passing it back to you, Chair Acefa.
Great. So now I would like to introduce Executive Director Lynn Von Koch-Liberts for item number 5, which is the Executive Director's report.
Great. Thank you so much, Chair Acefa, council members. Good afternoon. First, I would just like to take a moment right off the top to recognize California State Transformation Agency Secretary David Kim, who has recently left state service this month. So we just really wanted to take a moment to thank Secretary Kim, both for his time at the Strategic Growth Council, as well as his visionary leadership for his time in CalSTA. We will very much miss his enthusiasm and his passion for sustainable and equitable transportation and communities. So we'd also like to say we're very much looking forward to working with Acting Secretary Alyssa Canove as the new council member for CalSTA. And we want to also thank Deputy Secretary Darwin Savi for being here today to represent CalSTA. So next slide, please. So since we last met, we have welcomed several new staff members. So we have Jennifer Kim, who has joined the Transformative Climate Communities program as an analyst. Sarah Newsham, who has joined the same program as an associate. Justin DeWale, who has joined the Affordable Housing Sustainables Community program as an associate, and Melissa Quintero, who is SGC's new associate counsel. Additionally, the California Council on Science and Technology has placed fellow Montre Spikes, PhD, in our climate change research program, and SGC and the Office of Planning and Research are excited to welcome our new legislative director, William Robinson. So moving forward with just a couple highlights from our program since we last convened. The first was just an amazing event that was held last week for the PACE program. So this was in collaboration with Grid Alternatives and Community Assistance for Climate Equity Program, or CASE, and the staff of these two programs hosted the Community Capacity Building Summit last Friday. This was an event that featured cohort members from Strategic Growth Council Partners Advancing Climate Equity Pilot Program and CARB's Clean Access California Pilot Program. Now, these cohort members are community leaders in frontline and tribal communities who received 15 months of training to help them implement their community vision. And what's really exciting about this event, which is the first of its kind for this program, is that the event helped connect program participants with funders, legislators, and peers to help support them in their ongoing important community work. So a really great innovation, a way to really level up our support to communities, and a model that I think we're looking forward to seeing how we can continue to replicate within our council work. Next slide, please. Also, in the last 2 months, I've had the opportunity to visit our transformative climate community sites several times. So the first visit was December 15th and 16th, where staff from SGC, the governor's office, and the legislature visited Fresno and Bakersfield. So as we toured the TC sites in each city, as you can see on these pictures, we met with city and community leaders to really learn what makes TCC model so effective. And then on January 20th, I joined several council members, key staff and leadership from departments to tour Transform Fresno, which is the TCC implementing partner. In both visits, we toured projects that exemplify the variety of our interagency projects, community health, urban and community forestry, low carbon transportation, and affordable housing. We really learned firsthand how capacity building and technical assistance initiatives, as well as well thought through guidelines, help empower local leaders to successfully access resources to enhance their communities. Transform Fresno is in an advanced state with their implementation grant. And following this trip, I asked the TCC team to put together information about the governance model that can help us explain and share what makes this program exceptional. So I look forward to sharing this with the council and the public in the near future. Also, we will be organizing more SGC site visits in the future, so please stay tuned. Now moving forward to council updates. This November, the council amended the August 2020 racial equity resolution to include an action to stand up a racial equity resource hub on the SGC website. So this hub will serve as both a collection of well-vetted resources for government that will aid state and local entities in advancing racial equity strategies. Since then, the staff have coordinated with the Council Racial Equity Working Group to further develop their thinking around the resource hub. They've begun to compile initial resources, and they are creating the draft design of the website. So our next steps will be to continue to gather and vet resources and to build out the website online before we get ready to launch this publicly. So we plan to present the results in the April council meeting, which coincides with the time that council members will be sharing their agency's progress on their commitments to identifying and implementing concrete actions to achieve racial equity. As it relates to legislative updates, just one thing to share with the council members today. So January 5th, Governor Newsom signed an executive order extending AB 361, and this extends the exemption under the Bagley-Keene and open meeting laws, which allows us to continue to meet remotely during this state of emergency. So what that means for us is that our February council meeting will continue to be on Zoom, and then we'll be continuing to watch this legislative space as it relates to our next council meeting in April. And so thank you for your time, and I hand it back over to Chair Safa.
Well, thank you so much for that overview, Director Van Koop-Liebert. It was, for me, such an eye-opener to have those trips in Fresno the last week for a couple of days. Not only how best these projects exemplify when government and community come together to address some of the challenges. These are some of the best examples that I've seen anywhere that connect the dots that we talked about in the budget proposal. They create places, homes, urban ag, access to opportunity for people of color. And it is not only the projects that actually I was really blown away by, it was most importantly talking to the community groups who are actually behind the implementation of those projects. It really puts to light a lot of the work that we're doing here, and some of it on the affordable housing and sustainable communities grants we'll talk about later, what that does on the ground to communities in places like Fresno. It was just an eye-opener to hear directly from 21-year-old to 75 and 80-year-olds there who are engaged on the ground, implementing projects, coming up with ideas that they believe would address some of the equity challenges or displacement or access to health opportunity, fresh foods. And as we've discussed, some of the council members have pointed this out before. I think we need to get out as much as possible. I know COVID is a challenge, that we will look for opportunities for us to engage on the ground in having direct connection and access to the projects that we fund and programs that we fund through this program. So I look forward to that work from council members in the coming months and year. With that, I will just open it up for discussion or council comments on this specific item. Please feel free to use the hand on your Zoom if you would like to comment on this item.
Sam, and by the item you mean the comments that were just made by the director, correct?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Well, I just like to add that I'm very encouraged about the progress that we're making on the hub, and look forward to receiving the recommendations and aggregating those various resources to share more broadly. I think that's absolutely a step in the right direction, and I want to acknowledge Lynn and her team's leadership on developing that new resource that I'm sure will be well taken advantage of.
Great. Anyone else? Perfect. So now we'll open it up for public comments on this item number 5.
And Chair Assefa, we do not have any public comment for this agenda item.
Great. So now we will jump to the next item, which is item number 6. It is an action item. I would like to invite again Director Vanko Klibert, Saharnaz Mirzazad, Deputy Director of Community Investments and Planning, and Mark Caswell, Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program Manager, to present on the AHSC's Round 6 awards. We brought this as part of the action item discussion. I think this again, I understand one of the most sweeping or highest funding program within this AHSC program. So I'm really excited about hearing on staff's recommendation on this.
And Chair, before we move on, actually, there was a public comment on the Executive Director's report from Anita Lopez. So I would ask if we go back to the previous item and wrap that before we move on.
Oh, great. Let's go back to public comments on item number 5, the Executive Director's report.
Hi, thank you. This is Anita Lopez. I am a PACE cohort member. And really helpful to kind of see something I said got up there that was not really what I expected. But I'm joining today because I think it's so important that we do really consider, when we talk about equity, these issues of capacity building are really stretching our limits on what that means. And as a frontline community worker, as a well-educated Latina Chicana woman, I'm still doing a lot of that work at multiple levels. However, I find it still very difficult to engage in the process, particularly because, we have these kind of rules that have not really fully been addressed in relationship to equity. So public comment should probably always be available for any kind of capacity building or programmatic kind of recommendations. So that would be my first thing. The second thing that I wanted to share is that many of my colleagues and I over at the PACE cohort, we have really enjoyed the curriculum. We have really enjoyed the opportunity to network, these resources that have been given to us. And it really is almost like a certification program. And hearing that it's not having a second round of funding is a bit challenging, because it feels like an additional disinvestment in the community, and almost like, we're going to try something out, but if it doesn't work, or before we even know if it works, we're going to not fund it. So my point in saying all of this is to say, in all of these budget conversations and the allocation of these resources, really maximizing the opportunity to use your budget, your departmental budget, to build these programs out and to bring in those that have already been trained to do this work on behalf of the Strategic Growth Council. It's an investment in your community, and you would want a return on your investment. That's what you would want to see, is synergy building. intergenerationally and across the state. So if there's any opportunity for anybody.
Miss Anita, your time is up. Unfortunately, I have to stop you there. Thank you so much. Chair Asafa, back to you, and thank you so much for that public comment.
Yes, thank you, Anita. Any more public comments? No. So
I'm scanning our Q&A and our public comment form. It does not look like we have further comments for this agenda item.
Great. So we'll jump to item 6. Again, this is an action item, and I'll invite Executive Director Lynn Van Koch-Libert, Saharnas Mirzazad, Deputy Director of Community Investment and Planning, and Mark Caswell, Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program Manager, to present on the Round 6 awards for the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program. Lynn?
Thank you, Chair Asafa. I'd like to start by thanking the Department of Housing and Community Development, the California Air Resource Board, and the California Transportation Agency for their work scoring and ranking these projects. I'd also really like to thank and commend the applicants who submitted applications this round, as well as the stakeholders who've provided ongoing feedback and solutions. The work from the applicants and the stakeholders is truly vital to helping California communities thrive, and we thank you for your ongoing support and participation in this program. We had a lot of great projects to choose from, and the level of funding in this round is unprecedented in the history of this program. So I really do want to point out that I see that this program is just a great example of the governor's commitment to housing and climate budget, and that AHSC is just a great example of what can be achieved when you have a strong example of multi-benefit and interagency work. So a significant funding round of this size will be transformative for the state. The staff is recommending 37 projects to be approved by the council, and that stretches over 29 jurisdictions. So that's including cities and unincorporated areas. I'd just like to conclude by thanking the entire AHSC team, SGC, CARB, HCD, for all of their work throughout round 6 to ensure that the awards meet our statutory requirements and that they meet the guidelines that have been approved by this council. So with that, I'll pass over to Saharnas, who will start taking us through the staff recommendation.
Thank you so much, Lynn, and good afternoon, council members. My name is Saharnas Mirzazad, Deputy Director of Community Investment and Planning. Mark will present the awards to you, but I would like to first acknowledge former staff and the council actions last year to set up us for a success in round 6. I would like to thank all AHSC team at SGC, HCD, and CARB for all their hard work during the last couple of months to not only review and rank the projects, but also meet on a weekly basis to make sure that we are all moving forward in a coordinated way. As you know, all the application and review process was during the COVID time, and almost all SGC and CARB AHSC staff were on this job for less than a year. So it was a huge lift for many of us. Double the funding amount meant double the work of the entire AHSC team, especially HCD AHSC team that had to review increased number of projects for feasibility analysis. And I would like to recognize them for their hard work. However, the dedication from all team members got us to a place that the proposed historic AHSC awards of $88.8 million responds to all statutory and the council adopted targets, including project area types, 50% investment in disadvantaged communities, 50% for affordable housing, achieving tribal goals, geographic distribution, and also a homeownership project, which was identified as a priority by the legislators after guidelines adoption. With that, I would like to pass it to Mark Caswell, the AHSC Program Manager, to go over the awards, and thank you so much for all your work.
Thank you, Lynn and Saharnas and Council. My name is Mark Caswell. I'm the AHSC Program Manager, and I have the honor of sharing the recommended awards for this round 6 of the Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities. So the recommended action is to award $808 million from fiscal rounds 2019 and 2020, as well as 2020 and 2021 cap and trade revenue funds, as well as some additional funds that were identified by HCD for unused funds from rounds 1 and 2 in order to award a total of 37 projects as identified in the appendix attachment A and in the staff report. Next slide. So quick reminder, AHSC is a program that brings together housing, transportation, biking, walking, transit, bring that together in order to help improve affordability for housing, as well as to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. This is the 6th round, and we brought together with this combined will be $2.4 billion invested across 164 projects throughout the entire state of California. That $2.4 billion has been used to build a countless number of miles of bike lane, new buses, other infrastructure, as well as 16,000 housing units, 90% of which are affordable and controlled by income. And it will ultimately reduce 4.3 million metric tons of CO2 equivalents throughout the project lifetime. Next slide. So year over year, as you've heard previously, we've seen the number of award amount of funds continue to grow and grow over the years as round 6 has gone on. And thanks to the council's action in 2021, we've been able to have the largest NOFA to date of $785 million, of which we were able to take that number and then exceed that using some of the unused funds as mentioned previously. The growing funds are really important to help us combat the growing crisis of housing affordability and climate crisis, and we're rising to that challenge here in California. Next slide. So round 6, the quick overview is that the staff is recommending $808 million, as I mentioned, 793 from the auction proceeds, as well as an additional $14 million of unused funds that were identified in previous rounds due to a project either unable to complete their project or coming in under budget. And that brings us for the total of $808 million. The number of projects that we're recommending is 37 to be awarded. That's a 53 that applied, applications that were scored. There were a total of 54 applications originally. One of those projects withdrew of their own accord. So the team was able to score a total of 53 projects, and we're recommending for award 37 of those throughout the 3 categories. For those of you who may be new to the Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities Program, there are 3 separate project area types. There's Transit-Oriented Development, TOD, Integrated Connectivity Project, ICP, and Rural Innovations Project Area, RIPA. We often refer to those as kind of a denser city, slightly less dense suburban area, and then rural specifically as kind of the 3 categories there. And we know that because California has such a diverse population and diverse areas throughout the state that we wanted to make sure they were competing like for like in terms of communities. And that's why we have recommended awards of each of those throughout the 3 categories there. Next slide. And this is also the first time, round 6, that the council has identified a geographic target. They identified a total of 8 geographic areas. You can see them listed below or identified in the colors on the map there. And of these 8 geographic areas, the council priority was to identify 1 project per geographic area. And in doing so, with these 37 projects, we were able to achieve that goal with minimal use of discretionary funds, which I'll go into in a little more detail in a moment. But for now, you can see, California is a very large state, and you can see that we awarded projects all across the state there, from the north all the way down to almost the Mexican border. And we're able to make sure that we're really transforming communities throughout the state here. As again, 53 were scored, 37 recommended for award, $808 million. Next slide. And we're going to move on to discussing recommended awards. So again, I've said these numbers one more time: 808 million, 37 projects, 1.4 million metric tons will be reduced over these projects specifically. And for round 6 individually, it will be 4,463 new housing units, 4,007 of which are affordable units. And 61% of these total units will be extremely and very low income, not just low income, but some of the most critical housing to make sure that we're helping to get Californians into homes and have a safe place to live. Next slide. And a little bit on the discretionary process. Ultimately, when we took all the projects and after we'd identified their scores between all the different categories, we then identified a target area, which had a target goal of 35% of funds identified in the NOFA, which again was $785 million, and identify 35% of those to go to transit-oriented development projects, 35% to go to integrated connectivity projects, and 10% to go to rural innovations project areas. These are targets. It's worth noting these are not a threshold. This is not saying you must meet at a minimum 35% or 10%, but that they're a target. You know, in archery, if you're aiming for a target, it might be a little above, a little below. But the goal is to get as close as we could to those numbers with the number of projects that were applied for. And that resulted in 12 TOD projects for 37.6%, 12 projects for ICPs reaching 35.2%, and 5 rural projects for a 9.995% project there using the number of the NOFA. We also then, after identifying those 35, 35, and 10, kind of refer to it as you're filling 3 cups, then you look at what's remaining there. And there was approximately $17 million remaining of the NOFA. And the rest of that money goes to make sure that we're identifying the other statutory requirements as well as council identified priorities. 50% of the funds need to be spent in the disadvantaged community areas as identified in SB 1550, as well as 50% of the funds need to be going to affordable housing. And these 37 projects satisfy that. We also had a council identified priority of at least 1 tribal project, and we are able to accomplish that with one of the projects in the rural category. And then when it came to identifying the 8 geographic regions, using this initial number, we were able to hit 6 of the 8 categories. It did not include a project in the San Diego region or the inland Southern California region. So we used the discretionary funds to make sure we hit those next 2 geographic areas in order to achieve all of the council and statutory priorities. Next slide. And just so we're, if you want more on that, you can see section 108 of the guidelines, which go into detail of these priorities. So first category of transit-oriented development, you can see here that we identified 13 projects in the end that included the 12 projects, as I mentioned earlier. And then there was one other project, which was 1880 Walnut Street Housing. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in one slide, but these are 13 projects in 8 jurisdictions for a total of $303 million, 8 of which are in disadvantaged communities. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about what happened with 1880 on the next slide. So 1880 Walnut, if any of you saw the initial appendix that was published or the initial staff report, after publishing those award recommendations for 36 projects, HCD determined that 1880 Walnut had been incorrectly disqualified. This was specifically due to a calculation formula error related to home ownership projects and how we quantify affordability. And that was something that had been identified as an important barrier during last year's legislative session by Assemblymember Cooley of AB 1095. We wanted to make sure that we were finding ways to fund home ownership and that there were some challenges associated with that. And through HCD's hard work and rigorous meeting with the council, with the application, the applicants, as well as with the HCD staff, working really hard to make sure that they were able to identify a way around this issue there. And once we corrected that formula, we were able to identify that 1880 Walnut should be included in the original list. And thankfully, HCD was able to identify some additional funds, as I mentioned, that were unused from rounds 1 and 2 in order to correct this error. We want to thank the applicant and everyone who worked so hard to make sure that we could get this forward and bring this project together. It's a very exciting project. Next slide. And after TOD is integrated connectivity projects. Again, here we identified a total of 19 projects in 16 jurisdictions. It's worth noting here that 7 of the ICP projects, all 7 of the discretionary projects were ICP projects. That includes the bottom 2 there, Azuric, which is the one in the San Diego region, and Jacaranda Gardens, which is El Centro, which is in the inland Southern California jurisdiction. After we did that, and we said we've accomplished all of the goals of identified in the guidelines, we then went back to scoring the highest scoring projects, which allowed us to score the Lazuli Landing, 87th and Western, Pacific Station North, Vista Terrace, and Jordan Downs area H2B, which were the next highest scoring projects that remained in the project pool. And that was how we ended up with a total of 19 projects here in the ICP category. Next slide. And lastly is the Rural Innovations Project area. These 5 projects represent $78.458 million. And these projects include, specifically, I want to draw your attention to the Shasta Lake Downtown Revitalization Project. That project is a partnership with a federally recognized tribal entity and satisfies the requirements of the guidelines for a project that will benefit tribes as well. So these projects all were also very exciting, and we're really excited to see these spread out across the entire state there. And that's 5 projects, each in their own jurisdiction. Next slide. So again, to recap, the recommended action is for the council to concur with the staff report and recommend award for $808,303,114 from fiscal year 2019 and 2020 and 21 cap and trade revenues, as well as some unused funds to these 37 projects as identified in the attachment A of the staff report.
I also wanted to point that out that one of the projects, Sugar Pine Village in South Lake Tahoe, is an excess site project, which is a great thing that we see that integration happening across the board, the different executive orders and the priorities of the governor.
So what do we need here? Do we need a motion to approve, a motion to accept? I can't hear you, Sam.
Chair Assefa, you're on mute.
We will first open it up to discussion for council comments and then public comments, and then we'll take action and motion and approval. So I just want to, before I open it up, again, I would like to thank as well, not only Sarnaz and Mark, but the entire team that worked on this. I could not believe how complex this process is. And not only because of the thoughtful but complex guidelines, but for staff to actually add geographic distribution per SGC's direction, I was just incredibly impressed in terms of how much work that has gone into this, how thoughtful it has been. And I looked at and read pretty much most of the recommendations. So I just want to say thank you to the multi-agency staff that had worked really hard on this. So with that, I will open it up to council comments.
Well, I just would like to, Mark, again, let me echo the Sam's complimentary sort of observation. You're trying to cover an enormous state and equitably represent a number of regions. And when you do the math and you break down, now it certainly helps when you have almost $1 billion to award. Okay, and so it allows you to respond favorably to a substantial majority of the applicants, but then to exercise the discretion of the discretionary funds to capture additional projects that reflect the priorities of the council. In particular, for example, the attempting to have one award go to a tribal community. That's just the kind of thoughtfulness that again, in these sort of during these periods of a robust sort of a budget to work with, that we should be more aggressive in the way that you and your team have managed to develop these recommendations. It's a very, Sam says, very complicated undertaking. You're trying to populate these projects with an equity lens, while being judicious with the resources, while being thoughtful about residual resources that were discovered, that weren't programmed, and to deploy them as well, instead of holding them back for some other time in the future. And so again, this is how you begin to, and someone earlier talked about capacity in the documents. It talks about capacity as a change theory. This is how you move from the theoretical to the applied in terms of change. And so I just appreciate the work of you and your team.
Anyone else from fellow council members? Thank you, Council Member Munoz, for that comments. I see Mark, then Shireen.
I actually think one of our public members was up before me. Oh,
we will have a public comment after council discussions.
I'm one of our council members, though.
Oh, I don't see, I don't know why.
She's waving her hands there.
Oh, Secretary
Public member
Castro Ramirez. Yeah, Secretary Castro Ramirez. please.
Chair
No, I think
Estefan,
it's
I'm right here.
public member Caprice.
Oh,
Must be a Zoom thing.
I don't have my screen. I need to, maybe I should do.
No, I'm just, it's
Gallery.
like how, it's like how San Diego was treated in this round. There's an afterthought. No, that was a setup. That was a setup.
It's a Freudian slip here.
No problem. No
Go ahead.
problem.
Nicole.
Thank you. So I want to echo the comments that were just made about how extraordinary a job staff did. It's very clear this was an unprecedented amount of work and analysis and thoughtfulness. And so kudos, congratulations, and also congratulations to all the winners. Yeah, I do believe this will be transformative and game-changing and really exciting. So, you know, kudos to everyone involved. I also just want to give a shout out to the staff who worked with me, because needless to say, I'm from Southern California. And while I, and we, many people in Southern California appreciate the awards that are not only going to be given today, but also historically, there has been, you know, not an equal amount or even close to a fair share that has been awarded in Southern California. And I did ask staff to do a little bit of digging into why that is, because it's something that we've been raising consistently over the last few years. And I would just shout out immediately that the guidelines that changed last year that allowed for discretionary funds to be used to ensure there's geographic distribution, that played out beautifully. And so very pleased that National City and San Diego, you know, be 400 affordable units in a disadvantaged community. This is going to be really important, and super excited for MAC Project, who I think is on the phone. It happens to be my friends. So I'm very excited that they won this award. But at the same time, you do sometimes just also have to have a cold, hard look at the data. And I had asked staff to put together an analysis. It's in the backup materials. It's on page 57. And historically, for rounds 1 to 6, Southern California has really lost out. And it's not that it's anybody's fault. There's no malicious intent here. It's just a reality. And staff helped explain this to me of some of the methodology used in the modeling, especially at the CARB GHG modeling. And again, this is nobody doing anything wrong or, you know, not intending to have Southern California lose out. It's nothing like that. It's just that historically our land use patterns, our transportation system is rooted in bus mode. Like that's the backbone of our transit system. And that's not going to change anytime soon. LA is obviously doing a really good job of starting that transformation into having more of a balance between bus and rail and active transportation. San Diego, as people probably know, we have a brand new plan that's going to finally invest in rail in our region. But we're talking, this is going to take decades to actually come to fruition. In the meantime, we have communities, working class communities who are transit dependent. You know, historically, there's an equity issue in play here because rail riders are traditionally choice users and bus riders are transit dependent. And so Southern California has a lot of working class families that are needing improved bus services and are needing to live closer to their jobs and other services. And so the fact that we are not receiving our fair share of the affordable housing and transportation funds means that not only are families losing out in Southern California, not only is our air not getting cleaned, but also, and you know, this is kind of an impact that I don't think anyone intends. There's additional pressure on our elected officials to build sprawl. And that's happening as we speak. In fact, there's a hearing at our County Board of Supervisors where we are under great threat of pretty significant expansion of sprawl in our backcountry. That, by the way, everyone loses. Everyone across the whole state. You can do any kind of GHG calculation you want. There's nothing that's going to make up for in these infill projects for all the additional GHG and pollution that will come from this additional sprawl that's being considered seriously at the County of San Diego. And again, our building industry has a pretty compelling case because we keep losing on infill development. And also we're not modeling what infill development looks like in Southern California. So you have like all these factors in play where we can't even demonstrate and show like, hey, this is the different way we can build out our communities. This is the way we can, you know, really have that transit-oriented development. So we're not having model projects, we're not catalyzing that shift, and we're increasing air pollution and really putting people in harm's way with wildfire risk. I mean, all the environmental organizations were at the Board of Supervisors today pushing back really hard, but it's tough when the conversation, understandably and rightfully so, is about how do we build more housing. So it's these competing pressures. And so all I'm sort of asking today, again, super congratulations to everybody who won. We're not challenging any of the awards or anything. We want to move forward. We're just looking at the next round. We are asking that the SGC staff and CARB staff continue to work together. I know they have a strong partnership to identify ways to improve the methodology of the GHG modeling so it can really reflect the reality that we are our transit system, rooted in the bus system, and that how can we figure out, again, creative ways so that that is recognized and acknowledged and frankly allows for better access to AHSC. And so I am going to actually officially ask that to be in the motion. I don't have to make the motion. I mean, I will second the motion and add that if possible. But I think it's really important, and especially today, again, because of the sprawl pressure that we're under, we need help, we need support, and it's the right thing to do. And so that's where I'm coming from. But again, I want to triple reinforce how much staff has been helping me throughout this process to understand why Southern California was losing out. And I knew it was nobody had any negative intention. It was just kind of, I don't even know exactly why, but bottom line is that I know there are people really invested in making it better, and I appreciate that. And so just looking for support today so that we can have, more equal opportunity to AHSC for the whole state. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Calpretz, for you continuing to raise this structural and equity issues, and also pointing out some of the challenges within the structure and the guidelines that we have. And this is something that you should continue to work to improve. It is very challenging, but I think I wasn't clear about your recommendation about a motion. What I heard was that you would ask SGC staff and CARB to continue to work to basically address this issue or improve the process in the system. That's what I heard. Did I misrepresent that?
Yeah, it's just, I would like to add that to the motion just to make sure staff is clear and that there's no, I just want to make it as direct and certain that it's actually going to happen, so that it would be part of the motion of approving these awards. That in addition to approving these awards, we would be asking the staff of those two agencies to explore, the methodology of the CARB modeling.
And
sure.
if I may, Chair.
Sure.
Thank you, Councilmember Capretz. I understand the direction that you're asking for SGC staff. And I think that one of the things that I love about this program is that it continually evolves. And part of that evolution is really thinking about how do we really monitor the data? How do we be able to use that to make data-driven policy decisions and to be able to inform conversations and dialogue? So I think the council ask that we kind of investigate further what are the impacts of the model, and how can we kind of think about a model in a way that's responsive around the full estate. I think from an SGC perspective, that is a conversation that we're in a process that we're very happy and willing to undertake, and think that makes a lot of sense as we go into the next round to facilitate that dialogue.
Great, thanks, Director Van Kock-Libert, for that clarification. I just want to check in terms of whether this could be just a directive. I'm not sure. Do we need to vote on it? I'm just going to ask Matt to help me on this in terms of procedure, adding this on the motion in addition to the approval.
Sam, can I ask just a question of Public Member Caprice? Maybe I'm just. So are we asking to study more carefully why, in particular, this region of Southern California, or maybe more specifically Los Angeles, was under awarded in the current sort of award recipients?
No, and you're talking to me, right?
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay. No, we are really just looking forward because for all 6 rounds, there's been an underinvestment in Southern California. And that's the staff had provided that data to show that. So no, it's really not about this round. It's like going forward, how can we,
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Great. So before I move to the next one, Matt, if you could wait. Okay.
So as I understand Councilmember Capretz's request, it's for direction to SGC staff and CARB staff to evaluate, and I'd want to get maybe the specific language from Councilmember Capretz as to what the nature of the inquiry, but for that to be included in a motion that is to be made. So anyone can make a motion during council comment or as designed in the agenda after public comment. And I think what Councilmember Capretz, correct me if I'm wrong, we were asking for is that someone would kind of bring along that direction as part of their motion.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. I'm sorry, I didn't know when we were supposed to make a motion.
We'll be doing that after the public comments, so we can come back to that. Great. So next, the order that I have is Deputy Director Mark Starr, then Deputy Secretary Shireen D'Souza, and then Secretary Castro Ramirez, in that order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I echo the prior comments. Hugely impressive work by staff and everybody involved. And, in terms of metric tons of CO2 eliminated, it's a substantial amount, a new high. By our numbers, it's at least 50% higher than even just the last round. So very successful. And we're also very pleased that AHSC was able to have its first tribal awardee, and we certainly look forward to more of that in the future. We have no concerns with these round 6 awards. We'll certainly support it, but also want to encourage even greater health equity considerations in future rounds. As you know, a key part of our agency's role here is to bring a health equity lens to actions like this and regarding land and use and climate action. And providing an equity framework to prioritize less resource regions or tribes or rural communities sometimes can mean that the project may reduce fewer emissions than an urban project. But we can prioritize health equity and expected emissions be reduced through health equity strategies. And emissions reduction strategies can simultaneously advance health and equity outcomes. So I really want to emphasize that in the future and giving special attention to the needs of those groups at those entities and communities at greatest risk of poor health, including historically oppressed or marginalized racial or ethnic groups. As the metaphor our secretary likes to use is basically floating the boat. A partially submerged boat needs to be floated before it can move forward. And so some of these communities need that extra attention. So we can simultaneously reduce the emissions that lead to climate change and its health consequences and assure that the strategies employed also improve healthy living conditions for those facing inequities. So that's our key takeaway, that there's a value to addressing multiple policy objectives at the same time to catalyze greenhouse gas reductions and incentivize climate action in less urbanized areas, further equity goals, which the governor has provided leadership. So that will be the end of my comments on this particular item. Thank you.
Great. Shireen?
Thanks, Chair. And thanks so much to Member Capretz for bringing up this important issue of train transit versus bus transit. And totally respect and would go along with the resolution that has been suggested. But I'll just let you know that CARB is actually studying a range of potential updates to the GHG calculations as part of the revision for the calculator for round 7. And, in talking with CARB staff about this issue, they've highlighted that to fully address this and other topics, we may need to go beyond GHG calculations and also revisit scoring criteria and program guidelines. And so CARB and SGC staff are already having that discussion, and it's going to continue. And there's going to be this public input process over the coming months to take into account comments like the ones you made and from stakeholders all over the state around this suite of issues. So I'm glad that at least the comments that you're making are aligned with the direction of travel that CARB and SGC and the interagency is taking. And since I have the floor, I want to raise another issue, and this is not for a formal resolution. This is more kind of an informal request or informal direction to SGC around the process to develop the Round 7 guidelines. And basically the ask is that SGC should work closely with key staff and implementing partners, including CARB, to map out a process that allows for the best interagency process to occur. And from our perspective, the roles of agencies that engage in that Round 7 guidelines development should be grounded in statute and provide clarity for all the partners in the process. And I think this has happened in the past, and we were excited for a similar kind of robust process around the Round 7 guideline development to occur. So just throwing that out as an informal request to SGC. Oh, and I should have said this at the very start. Huge thank you to Mark, Saharnaz, and the teams at the rest of the team at SGC, and then the teams at HCD and CARB for all of the incredible work to create this really groundbreaking award.
And thank you, Deputy Secretary D'Souza. I've noted that, so I think that's an excellent direction, and that's something that SGC will definitely take on. Thank you.
Great. Secretary Castro Ramirez, please.
Yes, thank you so much, Chair. And I'll keep my remarks very short. Again, echoing the thanks and the appreciation to the staff of SGC, the staff at HCD, and the many member agency teams that are part of this effort. As you mentioned, Chair, this is a very complex but comprehensive effort in terms of evaluating applications and advancing these recommendations. So to all the communities that put forward a proposal and to those that are being recommended for an award, congratulations, not just for submitting your proposal and receiving an award, but congratulations for leading in your communities around housing, transportation, and improving overall the environment and addressing climate change. I'm of course very pleased to see that with this record amount of funding, almost $809 million funding. This funding will enable the state to support the creation of over 4,400 housing units. Very much appreciate, Mark, as you were presenting the detail of the grants and the awards, the focus on the affordability levels. I do think it's important for us to always pay attention to the types of units that are being supported, right? And at what AMI and what level of access we're creating. I'm of course also, this is one of the efforts and projects that I'm very drawn to and fond of, because this is of course community development and community building at its best, right? It is bringing folks on the ground, local agencies with housing developers, with community builders, with the connection to transit, and looking at how to improve the well-being and livability. And Mark, very much appreciate from AHS, Councilmember Starr, very much appreciate how important it is for us to not forget the health and housing, the health component, and embedding that. So to the point, I guess that was mentioned earlier, as we continue to look at the next round, and as we continue to refine from the learnings, right, and the feedback that we're receiving, I also would add to the thinking and to the comments that it is important for us to also look at the changes that are taking place within the state's bond financing system and ensure that we're thinking about changes that are happening there so that these projects that are receiving investment from AHSC are well positioned to be able to secure additional financing to get into construction. So look forward to to having to being part of the conversation there. So again, just kudos. I'm of course going to support the recommendation from staff and appreciate all of the due diligence.
Great, thank you, Secretary Ramirez. Before we go to public comments, any other comments from fellow council members? Seeing none, again, I'll just echo again, just let's not lose sight of the magnitude of impact this will have on the lives and livelihoods of many in the state, both from the climate, as Deputy Director Starr pointed out, and Deputy Secretary Ramirez pointed out in terms of the impact on people. Let's not forget the magnitude of this. And then again, that is a historic investment the state is putting in this area. So with that, we'll now take public comments on this item. And I understand from staff that we have received some letters on this item, and we'll ask that they be included in the record of the meeting. Emily?
Thank you, Chair Asefa. Quickly, before I move into our 12 public commenters for this agenda item, I'd like to just remind folks on the line and joining via Zoom how to make public comment. You can visit us at sgc.ca.gov/meetings and complete the public comment form linked there for this item or future item. You'll need to complete a separate form for each item on which you wish to speak, and you may complete a form at any time during the meeting. Each speaker is going to have a maximum of 2 minutes to make their remarks. This is going to be critical for this agenda item as we have so many public commenters. If you're online, you'll see a timer pop up on your screen. Please make sure to monitor that and wrap up your remarks accordingly. Whether you are online or on the phone, you will be notified when your time is up. After that, we will have to mute your microphone. You do not need to take any additional action once we have muted your microphone. So with that, Lois, if you'll pull up our timer, we're going to begin public comment. Again, this is for agenda item number 6. We have 12 people signed up, as I mentioned. When you hear your name, please raise your hand in Zoom. You can do this by clicking raise hand under the participants menu, when you find, which you can find at the bottom of your screen on the Zoom platform, or by pressing *9 if you're joining by phone. We've received public comment cards from the following individuals, and this is the order in which we'll call you. So Maura Top is a representative with the City of San Diego. She'll be followed by Claudia Monterosa with the City of Los Angeles, Michael Antwine with the City of Compton, Veronica Beatty with the California Coalition for Rural Housing, followed by Keith Key with Keith Key Enterprises, Sally Greenspan with Building Sustainable Communities, Violet Phlox with the Carpenters Contractors Cooperation Committee, Allison Wood with SANDAG, Stephen Russell with the San Diego Housing Federation, Jovana Morales Tigren with the Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability, Arnulfo Manriquez, and lastly, David McCormick with the City of Santa Cruz. So again, you'll have 2 minutes to make your public comment. Please raise your hand if you have not done so yet. I will call your name and we'll go ahead and unmute your microphone when it's your time to speak. So with that, we will now begin public comment with Moira Top. Moira, if you want to unmute yourself, you can begin public comment.
My apologies there. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the council. My name is Moira Top, speaking today on behalf of the City of San Diego. First, I would like to thank and certainly associate myself with Council Member Capretz's comments regarding the San Diego region. And unfortunately, the City of San Diego is disappointed that neither of its applications are recommended for funding. San Diego is the state's second largest city Yet this is the second round in a row that has shut out San Diego projects from AHSC funding. We appreciate and have taken the opportunity over the last several months to comment on guidelines as the council and staff have worked extremely hard to sharpen standards for the program. However, the GHG scoring criteria continues to place emphasis on projects reliant on rail systems, and we believe undervalues communities that rely on bus transit. We certainly know it's not the intention of the program or the council to disproportionately reward the few well-resourced areas that have higher densities and fully built out rail systems to the detriment of bus-dependent communities like San Diego. We look forward to working with you and your staff to reform the guidelines as you move forward with the next round of grants. The City of San Diego stands ready to leverage AHSC funding to advance health, equity, and sustainable infrastructure with an eye toward greater geographic diversity amongst those disadvantaged communities, which are in urgent need of state investment. Thank you so much for the opportunity to provide these comments.
Thank you so much. So next we'll call on Claudia Monterosa with the City of Los Angeles. Claudia, if you'd like to unmute yourself and begin public comment.
Yes, thank you, and good afternoon, council members. My name is Claudia Monterosa, Chief Housing Officer with Mayor Garcetti's Office of City Homelessness Initiatives. And on behalf of our office in the City of LA, we'd like to congratulate the Strategic Growth Council and the Housing Community Department for their tremendous leadership in carrying another successful 6th round of AHSC funding, in particular, given the ongoing constrained pandemic realities facing all of us. We appreciate the opportunity to express our full support on the Strategic Growth Council staff round 6 funding recommendations for the City of Los Angeles. And we are deeply grateful and thrilled that SGC is recommending over $163 million for 7 projects that will have significant units. These awards will directly enable the city to advance the development of much needed new affordable housing for low income families, homeless individuals, veterans, and special needs populations. And these awards could not come at a much more critical time. Of the 7 city recommended projects, those will total 929 units, of which 890 units, or 95%, will be dedicated for extremely low income and low income individuals. And 105 of these $1 million will be dedicated for housing and $54 million for transportation related infrastructure projects. We value and appreciate our ongoing partnership with the Strategic Growth Council and the HCD, and thank the staff for their diligence and commitment, and also support through the technical assistance. We stand ready with you to continue to work on this wonderful project, and we are so appreciative of these recommendations from the staff. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. So next we'll move on to Michael Antwine with the City of Compton. If you'd like to go ahead and unmute yourself, we'll start your time when you begin speaking. Just as a reminder, yep, we can hear you. Yep, please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Great, can you hear me? I'm unmuted.
Yep, we hear you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Council, Honorable Chairperson, Michael Antwine, Assistant City Manager for the City of Compton. I'm here representing the City of Compton, our Mayor Sharif, as well as the Council, and all of our 100,000 residents here. We are excited and we're extremely supportive and thankful for the staff, Mark, as well as Ms. Wazard, for the recommendation of approval for one of our projects. This is a significant and catalytic project for the City of Compton. It's located in our downtown area, and we are excited to be able to move forward with necessary and needed affordable housing in the City of Compton. As the Council knows, this is a disadvantaged community with over 23% of our residents living in poverty. So this will provide great access to affordable and high quality housing in the City of Compton, as well as significant amount of resources toward our infrastructure. Approximately $16 million of this funds will go to much needed infrastructure within the City of Compton. Our infrastructure is approximately 70, 80 years old with significant deterioration. So this will be a very, very useful resource for our community. We're glad to be able to provide reductions to greenhouse gases with this project, reducing cars and emissions, as well as a significant amount of solar panels will be provided to this project. And so we're excited to be able to meet some of the goals and the mission of the council. We're also excited for the partnership we have with Metro on this project, where we'll be purchasing 3 new buses, clean air buses, that will provide public transportation for these residents, as well as those that traverse throughout the city and along that rail line system. And lastly, we're excited that this project also received an award for design from the Urban Forum of Western Side Pride. And it just shows the commitment from the community and the city to transit-oriented development and as well as meeting the needs of affordable housing. So again, thank you to the council and the staff for this recommendation, and the city of Compton is greatly appreciative.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mr. Entwine. Next, we'll move to Veronica Beatty with the California Coalition for Rural Housing. Veronica, if you'd like to unmute yourself, we can begin your public comment period.
Good afternoon. My name is Veronica Beatty, and I'm the Director of Policy and Research for the California Coalition for Rural Housing. CCRH is a coalition of statewide advocates for affordable homes and sustainable communities in rural, farm worker, and American Indian tribal communities. One way we live that mission is by serving as technical assistance providers on the enterprise team, and we're grateful for that ongoing opportunity. We'd like to thank the SGC and HCD for their ongoing partnership in creating and evolving this impactful program. Congratulations to all 37 of the applicants recommended for awards today. We share in the enthusiasm at the historic size of this round's awards and are especially glad to see a second project come forward from a federally recognized tribal community. We know that the changes made and the technical assistance offered each program round continue to be incredibly successful in catalyzing projects that can really shift the future of the state, and all the more so as we see these larger, higher scoring applicant pools and award rounds. We were gratified to see the geographic equity analysis as a consideration in the awards and the recommended awards in each region. I want to thank Councilmember Capretz and staff for their inclusion of that analysis in the staff report. We can only improve what we measure, and it's clear that there remains some room for improvement. Despite efforts in recent rounds to make the program more accessible to all areas of the state, the largest urban areas continue to be the most successful, while historically divested, disproportionately disadvantaged rural areas and mid-sized cities that lack robust transportation infrastructure continue to have difficulty demonstrating achievable GHG reduction despite the quality of the projects themselves. We look forward to continuing to support SGC and CARB staff however possible as they continue to look at the GHG calculation methodology to correct for these inequities. We also look forward to building capacity and iterating on the program guidelines overall to ensure that low-income communities and communities of color in rural areas have equal access to investment, innovative housing, and transportation projects. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Next, we'll move to Keith Key with Keith Key Enterprises. Keith, if you'd like to go ahead and unmute yourself, we'll start your time.
Great, thank you very much. First, I want to commend the staff and as mentioned early on, the hard work that took place to make these applications possible and the thoroughness they took to really evaluate these packages. Working with the city of Compton has been an honor for us, and as a predominantly Black and Brown community to have the ability as a minority developer to be involved in a project of this scale is just phenomenal. So I commend the SGC Council for really recognizing the importance of having minority developers involved and attracted to these projects, because I think that's important as it relates to opportunities for economic development, minority participation, as well as workforce development that will take place on a project of this scale. So as Mr. Antwine mentioned early on, this is a catalytic project for the city of Compton. It's downtown development is going to really hopefully create a environment for future development of other activities that can take place near its metro center. So thank you very much for this recommendation. And again, I commend all of you for the hard work that it takes to do the work that you do and to support affordable housing and transportation and environment sensitive projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Key, for that. So next we'll move to Sally Greenspan with Building Sustainable Communities. Sally, if you'd like to go ahead and unmute yourself, we'll start your time.
Hello, this is Sally Greenspan with Enterprise Community Partners. We are the lead technical assistance provider under contract with SGC for the AHSC TA program. And in this round, as in years past, our TA team worked extensively with affordable housing developers, transit agencies, local jurisdictions, and community organizations to help them navigate the complex AHSC application process and submit strong policy advancing applications across the state. We'd like to congratulate the 37 successful applicants who are being recommended for award today. These ambitious projects are advancing numerous state policy goals, including creating thousands of affordable housing units and delivering impactful GHG reduction strategies. Enterprise is pleased to note that this is the largest award round of AHSC's history, and that even with the increased funding amount, all of the awarded projects are as ambitious and high-performing as in past rounds. In fact, by our calculations, the average score of awarded projects, as well as the GHG reduction per dollar invested, are higher in this round than in the last round, even though there are 40% more awarded projects. We'd also like to acknowledge that despite the increased number of awards, there are still many high quality and worthy projects for which there were not sufficient funds. We recognize the eternal struggle of the AHSC program to balance its central goal of achieving GHG reductions with other policy goals, including making investments in advancing sustainable land use patterns, especially in parts of the state that do not currently have the transit infrastructure that is so often required to deliver high GHGs. We look forward to continuing to work with the council to find this balance and advance urgently needed AHSC projects in all corners of the state. Last but not least, we would also like to thank the staff at SGC, HCD, ARB, and CalSTA for their hard work in administering AHSC Round 6. We know the challenges of this round created additional administrative burden, and we deeply appreciate the dedication of all the staff at all agencies. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Greenspan. Next, we'll move to Violet Phlox with the Carpenters Contractors Cooperation Committee. Violet, if you'd like to unmute yourself, we'll go ahead and start your time.
Good afternoon, council members and staff. I'm Violet Phlox, Public Affairs Representative for the Carpenters Contractors Cooperation Committee, also known as the Quad C. The Quad C is a nonprofit labor management organization that monitors the construction industry for compliance with the law to ensure fair competition and to prevent workers from being victims of wage theft. In the course of our compliance, we find subcontractors who break the law and in some cases end up with criminal charges for their violations. Over the years, funding from the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities program has been instrumental in helping address the state's affordable housing crisis while stimulating employment opportunities in the construction industry. We sent a letter earlier today with comments regarding the Round 6 funding, particularly Section 107G, Local Workforce Development and Hiring Practices. Given our on-the-ground knowledge of subcontractors who cheat the system and cheat their workers, we recommend an adjustment to the point matrix to promote quality construction jobs. Ultimately, we recommend developers obtain a letter of commitment or an enforceable agreement from subcontractors who participate in a state-approved apprenticeship program. Additionally, we'd like developers to commit to verifying their subcontractors by checking if they have had any prior labor violations or penalties assessed for unlawful labor practices. We look forward to the next round of funding and thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much for that, Ms. Phlox. Next, we'll move to Allison Wood with Sandag. Allison, if you'd like to unmute yourself, we'll go ahead and start your time.
Good afternoon, Chair Acefa and members of the council. My name is Allison Wood and I'm a senior regional planner at Sandag, the San Diego Association of Governments. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My comments echo the concerns of Councilmember Capretz. Sandag has supported many applications from our region to the AHSC program, and while we are grateful for today's recommended award for the Azarick project in National City, we are disappointed that the San Diego region has once again struggled to successfully compete in this program. As the guidelines are updated for Round 7, we look forward to working closely with staff at SGC and CARB to explore new ways of scoring projects that can account for the unique ways that our region is working to reduce VMT and implement our sustainable community strategy. We have a newly adopted regional plan demonstrating how we will meet our GHG reduction targets. In the San Diego region, we have relatively shorter trips. This is due to more dispersed employment centers and a lack of super commuters. The way the AHSC scoring is done, projects involving rail dominate. Rail is one strategy in our plan, but we also have significant investments in rapid bus, on-demand services, micromobility, and active transportation combined with infill development to reduce VMT. We have modeled and quantified the VMT reductions from these strategies for our region. We want to share our data and analysis in hopes that it can inform round 7 guidelines and scoring. These are important changes that will make the AHSC program more equitable. Many of our low-income communities and communities of color stand to benefit from expanded housing choices near bus service. We also have disadvantaged communities in our region that don't meet the DAC criteria for this program, and not funding projects that benefit our lower income communities and communities of color further disparities in our region. Again, we look forward to working with you on these issues and ensuring that future cycles of the AHSC program benefit the San Diego region. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Next, we'll move to Stephen Russell with the San Diego Housing Federation. Stephen, if you'd like to unmute yourself, we'll go ahead and start your time.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, Honorable Chair and Council members. I'm Stephen Russell, President and CEO of the San Diego Housing Federation, here to speak about equity in future AHSC allocations and to support Councilmember Capretz's requests. So it's clear from the recommendations in round 6 today that there is an abundance of worthy and valuable projects to choose from. However, the AHSC program continues to have geographic equity issues, as demonstrated by the proposed awards for this current round. For example, both San Diego and the Inland Empire historically over the life of the program have received less than half of the allocation that a purely population-based method would yield. And that's not to suggest a population-based method, but it is a metric of how current evaluation standards impact different communities inequitably. So we're here to recommend and ask that the Strategic Growth Council work with the Air Resources Board to develop a standard transit ridership methodology to ensure that ridership increase assumptions are accurate, realistic, and fairly evaluated in different regions. We ask also that the AHSC program use a scoring system that is more equitable to different transit modes. For example, projects that use bus routes in urbanized areas should only compete like for like with other projects that rely on bus in similar urbanized areas, rather than having to compete with projects that are paired with rail. There are formerly redlined communities here that struggle, especially post-redevelopment, to reverse decades of disinvestment, even as they are trying to support the kinds of transit-oriented housing development that would contribute to future reductions in greenhouse gases, that would increase connection to the broader economy, that would improve economic opportunity for the residents, improve health, and create a better quality of life in these neighborhoods. The standards that you use in evaluating future projects can help contribute to this brighter future for these communities. So as you review staff's recommendations today for this current round of funding, we support Councilmember Capretz's requests and ask that you work with the California Air Resources Board to develop standardized ridership methodology and to level the playing field by developing a more equitable way of evaluating different transit modes in this program. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Next, we'll move to Giovanna Morales Tigren with the Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability. Please go ahead and unmute yourself and we'll start your time.
Yes, hi, thank you. Good afternoon. I am the Housing Policy Coordinator with Leadership Council. We work in the San Joaquin and East Coachella Valleys. We continue to appreciate staff's openness to work with stakeholders to improve this and other programs' reach and access. This is evident as this council seeks to adopt a TA resolution as its next agenda item. However, as expressed before, we have serious concern about the geographic distribution of these funds. While there are a few inland region projects awarded, there is significant discrepancy in the number of projects awarded in more coastal and mega urban regions versus those inland, and even more worrisome are the lack of awards supporting rural communities. As this council continues to make decisions on how and where to spend millions of dollars, not just for AHSC, but other programs like TCC, SLC, community resilience funds, and so on, we cannot forget about the overlooked rural communities nor their role in fighting climate change. Additionally, the lack of meaningful community engagement continues to be an issue in this program. Community engagement metrics must be incorporated into the guidelines to ensure that there is robust and meaningful community engagement, not to mention community buy-in for the proposed projects. For example, although the Renaissance at Baker is a project included in the final final TCC plan submitted by the city in December, the community engagement process in deciding this project isn't clear. We must figure out a way to include community engagement metrics as part of the application process to show community engagement and community buy-in for the applicant projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Next, we'll move to Arnulfo Manriquez. Arnulfo, if you'd like to unmute yourself, we'll start your time.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Arnulfo Manriquez. I'm the president and CEO at MAC, and we are the developers and recipients for the Zurich project in National City. For the, MAC has been working in the National City for the last 57 years. And so we're excited that these opportunities are coming down to San Diego. I want to take this opportunity to thank the council and congratulate you on the largest amount of funds that are coming down into the state of California for these funds. And while but we're excited that we were part of the discretionary funds that were being allocated to San Diego, I do echo the sentiments of the previous speakers regarding San Diego. We do, as 29 years of working in affordable housing, the work that we do and the work that these funds are that will be able to go to a national city will truly create not only reduce greenhouse gas emissions and really help the environment. The work that we do as well works on, we help people get into electric vehicles, low-income families get into electric vehicles. I heard the council members earlier speaking about grid alternatives and the work that they're doing across the state. We work very closely with them on a lot of their initiatives here in San Diego. So there's a lot of all the work that happens down here in San Diego and the development that is happening really is moving us towards to be more competitive. And I want to thank you for the opportunity for the discretionary use of the funds for here in San Diego. It will have a huge impact. And as I said earlier, I want to echo the sentiments of our San Diego, because I would be remiss if we are not advocating for more funds for the county of San Diego. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for that. So lastly, we'll move to David McCormick with the City of Santa Cruz. David, if you'd like to unmute yourself, we'll start your time.
Great, thank you. Yes, my name is David McCormick with the City of Santa Cruz, and I'd like to express the city's appreciation to the council and for staff for supporting the Pacific Station North project. This is a transformative TOD project incorporating a new transit station with affordable housing, public spaces, and bike connectivity or bike ped connectivity. Like many of the other speakers, however, I would like to echo the concerns over the GHG Commission, as I'm concerned this may be the last project we're eligible for. Under the current methodology, as both a compact city as well as one with largely built out active transportation infrastructure and a transit district that is more in a recovery mode than an expansionary one, we were really challenged to find GHG reductions for this application, let alone the multiple ones we have coming down the line. And we hope that with the process of revising the program coming the year forward, we're looking at communities that have successfully achieved high walkability and bikeability ratings in dense urban environments to also use the co-location of major destinations and critical services like healthcare facilities and libraries, sports and cultural facilities, arts facilities, things that are planned in our upcoming affordable housing projects. So we have affordable housing library mixed use project that is going to be in great need for funding like this. But without a transit project to pair it with, it would be a challenge. Although locating that facility in a already dense and highly walkable, bikeable neighborhood will reduce VMT in its own way. So I just hope that the commission or the council and staff have an open mind in the upcoming process of revising the program. And I wanted to thank you all again for your support for Pacific Station. It's transformative for the whole region here in Santa Cruz.
Thank you very much for that. So Chair Acefa, that ends our public comment period for agenda item number 6. I will pass it back to you, unless Lois, you'd like me to just really quickly go through instructions for public comment again.
Okay, thank you.
Lois, would you pull that slide back up, please? Wonderful, thank you. Oh. All right, great, thank you so much. So this is just a friendly reminder, if you are interested in making public comment as part of today's SGC Council meeting, you can complete the form at sgc.ca.gov/meetings and ensure that you're submitting a separate form for each separate agenda item. We are on agenda item number 6. We will go ahead and call your name. We will call on your name in the order that we've received the public comment forms, and make sure to unmute yourself either using *6 or the unmute button on the Zoom lower right-hand corner of your screen. We'll go ahead and unmute your microphone, and please do remember to adhere to the time limit designated as 2 minutes for this council meeting. Thank you very much. I will pass it back to Chair Sefa.
Thanks, Emily, and thank you to all those who made comments and testified, that also those who sent us comments and feedback in writing. It is really critical that you get engaged. We take that to heart as well, and your feedback is incredibly important. As discussed today, this issue about guidelines and criteria are very complex and challenging, that we will continue to work on improving that, and staff has taken note on that. But thank you for your participation. So now, council members, I'll open it up for a vote. Is there a motion and a second to approve the staff recommendations?
I would move approval, and just want to acknowledge Councilmember Caprotz's I just want to ask where we ended up on that potential amendment to the resolution. Yeah. Maybe let me hold off on moving the motion and just ask where we stand on that potential modification.
Yes, I'm going to ask Councilmember Capretz to actually state on the language you would like to include as part of the motion. And
okay, great.
Go ahead,
thank you. Yeah. So the proposed modification, wrote it out, is to direct SGC and CARB staff to work together to look for new ways to score AHSC projects, including the GHG modeling criteria, to identify more equitable ways to evaluate different transit modes, such as buses.
Great. So Matt, is that then, do I need another motion, or does that I still need another motion to move forward with the approval of staff's recommendation, correct?
There is no motion on the table, so what we would need is a motion that moved the staff recommendation and, incorporated Councilmember Capretz's direction to staff.
I wonder, Chair, if I could just direct a question to Councilmember Capretz. I ultimately, want to support the exploration that you're talking about. I just want to make sure that the amendment is framed in neutral terms, so that by approving this amendment, we're not necessarily stating, one position around the adequacy of the current approach. Again, I'm very open to exploring alternatives. So perhaps instead of, look for more equitable, something like, explore, equitable approaches, or
just to evaluate different how about just instead of identify more equitable ways, it could be just to evaluate different transit modes, such as buses. No?
Yeah, and I'm not an expert on this topic area, so I don't know if we need to wordsmith right now, but certainly I think what you want to ensure gets in the resolution is a commitment or a direction for these entities within state government to, evaluate the current structure of the program and, explore opportunities to, continue to improve the program you know, to ensure equity of ... something like that.
What if Secretary Crowfoot and Member Capretz, what if we were to uncouple these? There seems to be general consensus about the current awards, and perhaps we vote on that, and then we make a motion to accept the language that Member Capretz is offering to ensure that it's captured in the record, and some action is taken on the evaluation of the impact of transit systems on future awards, except some elegant sort of hybrid of what is trying to be proposed that directs staff to do it, but uncoupled from what seems to be general consensus about the support for the current awards.
So the proposal would be to entertain two motions, one for staff's recommendation, another one relevant to improving the process and of evaluation of projects. Is that?
That's fine. Fine by me. That I'm neither here nor there on that. That's fine. Two motions is fine by me.
So I'll suggest the first motion on the staff's recommendation. Somebody make a motion and a second, and then we can then go to the second part. I would recommend that. So I think if you're, as I see, you're amenable to that. So
move staff recommendation.
So we got a motion from Secretary Crawford to move the staff recommendation.
Or I think that was Councilmember Munoz, but I would second.
Councilmember
Secretary
Munoz.
Crawford would second that motion.
Motion moved by Councilmember Munoz, seconded by Councilmember Crawford to approve the staff's recommendation. Matt?
Thank you, Chair. Chair Acefa?
Yes.
Deputy Secretary D'Souza?
Yes.
Councilmember Capretz?
Yes.
Secretary Castro Ramirez?
Yes.
Secretary Crowfoot?
Yes.
Councilmember Flatt?
Yes.
Deputy Secretary Jameson?
Yes.
Deputy Secretary Musavi?
Yes.
Councilmember Munoz?
Yes.
Deputy Director Starr?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Great. Now we will entertain a second motion. Councilmember Capretz.
Okay. So again, I'll try to narrow this down even more. Direct SGC and CARB staff to continue to work together to look for new ways to score AHSC projects, to evaluate different, including evaluating different transit modes such as buses.
Matt, did you get the language? Just to make sure. I want to make sure that it is precise.
We've pulled them from the YouTube transcript in the past
Okay.
during this
Great.
meeting.
Oh my gosh.
We're live. We're live governing.
Great. So,
if
go ahead.
Councilmember Capretz, we can conduct this verbally. It doesn't need to be something that I restate necessarily. If you want to restate that as a motion, that's.
Oh, okay.
that
I'd
is-
like to move to direct SGC staff and CARB staff to continue to work together to look for new ways to score AHSC projects, including evaluating different transit modes such as buses.
Second.
And I just do see a hand.
Okay.
Chair.
Deputy Secretary D'Souza.
Thanks. And Member Capretz, I'm not trying to wordsmith here, but I would like to see if we can make this language as neutral as possible, so to not prejudge what the outcome might be. And so would it be possible to say something like reevaluate transit types as opposed to say, look for new scoring or new methodology or something like that? Do you get what I'm trying to say? I'm all for
Okay, sorry, just say it. I already forgot how you phrased it. Or Matt, could you, oh my God, I'm gonna be horrible at this. I'm fine, that's fine with me.
The difference between what Shireen said and yours was reevaluating transit types as opposed
Okay, yeah,
to
then that.
evaluating new transit types, I believe.
To evaluate new transit, no, to evaluate.
Might I suggest language that says directing ARB and SGC to evaluate the current scoring criteria and to explore how best to ensure evaluation of all transportation types, including, for example, buses. Does that get it, what we're trying to do?
Fine by me.
Sorry,
to further complicate this.
I'm very open to the reevaluation. I just want to make sure that, you know, that we go into it with an open mind. We evaluate the current scoring system. We understand its impact. And then, you know, those entities do evaluate whether, you know, modifications in the scoring program, you know, would make sense to, you know, evaluate that broader set of transportation options. I know, sorry, Darwin.
Real quick on that, just to, not to further complicate this, but to take this to even more neutral terms, you know, I think kind of in line with the motion to try to have neutral language. I think it's important to not pre-assume that the issue here really is about the specific quantification of transit types, because really what we're trying to get at, the bottom line, I think, is different regions of the state, you know, look different, function differently, and we need to make sure we have equitable accounting for how we think about those areas to score. So the answer may very well be in transportation, but it could also be in how we account for density or other types of things that we look at in the quantification methodology and scoring. So just want to make sure that we, you know, I guess I would suggest that the direction we give really be about the outcomes we're trying to achieve, looking at the scoring criteria and quantification methodology to ensure, you know, equitable accounting of projects kind of across the board, across regions. I very well suspect that the transit pieces will be a big part of that conversation. I agree that bus transportation you know, plays a key role in the state, and we need to look at how we're accounting for that and make sure we're doing it accurately. But you know, I would hate to predetermine that that's the particular solution without giving staff the chance to really mull it over.
So,
Derek, Secretary Ramirez had her hands up.
Oh, yes, I was just going to also add a friendly amendment and also agree with Darwin's points here. So the friendly amendment, council member, would be to include all member agencies that are involved and engaged. So, you know, CalSTA, HCD in coming up with a set of recommendations. The other thought that I had is that we heard from, you know, during the public comment, some very good recommendations for us to consider as we begin to develop the guidelines for the next round. And so I'm wondering if there's a way to make this part of the process that will sort of lead to the proposed policy recommendations or guidelines that will come back to this council. And so maybe to the extent that we can connect this proposal to the process, and it might be helpful. I see Lynn's hand is up. It might be helpful to hear from Lynn in terms of what's the timing of that, you know, that process. What's the timing of getting to the guidelines, and when do we expect as a council to be able to review and comment on that?
So, Director, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So, Secretary, that's a great point. We are just right at the stepping off point for the next round of guidelines. So the public process will commence imminently. So thinking through kind of that connection, maybe what I would recommend is direct the AHSC team to evaluate, okay, as part of the guideline drafting, process, direct the AHSC team to evaluate scoring and quantification methodologies to reflect regional differences.
So that, if I can jump in, that sounds neutral to me, and it's all encompassing, and I think it captures each of the comments that I have heard so far. I actually drafted very similar notes: direct SGC staff to evaluate scoring criteria to ensure equitable regional outcome and distribution. So they're kind of similar.
Well, I like that a lot better.
Throw it back to Councilmember Capretz. This is your motion.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with. I did really actually like what you said, Chair, because I think that's getting to the heart of the matter. I mean, just to be clear, like we've been through many rounds and we've repeated these same points every year. So this is actually not new that we're confronting this. I think we're looking though for more action and like more results and more outcome-based solutions, because the data is clear. We're losing out on hundreds of millions of dollars in Southern California, period, end of story. Like that's not debatable. So what are we doing here to rectify that? I mean, I just want to tell you where that's coming from. It's not like just this kind of feel good effort. Like there's dollars being lost and there's new sprawl likely to be built. This is serious stuff. I really feel strongly about this. I mean, that sprawl is going to be a lose for everybody in California, everybody. So like, this is pretty big deal. And so, while I know everyone wants it to be neutral, I don't feel neutral. I feel that we are missing this opportunity to build infill and transit in Southern California. And this is going to hurt all Californians. So I am okay with either the chairs or our executive director's motion. I just want to make sure I'm clear on the intent behind this, so that it's not as like loosey goosey as it is sort of getting. Like there's actual real lives that are going to be impacted in Southern California, and air quality that's going to be impacted, and frankly the equity issue of people who have to live farther and farther away into the sprawl and having their livelihoods and their lives put on the line living in fire country. So it's like something has to change the numbers, the data. So anyhow, however we can reflect that. And the reason I wanted it to be an emotion is just so, frankly, politics is wild, and sometimes you just need to put things in. That's the only way I can be certain I can go back to Southern California and say like something at least we can see something will happen. And it's not going to be a repeat next year of these kind of numbers. I mean, there might be, but you know what I mean? There's going to be more, we have a better chance. So anyhow, that's where I'm coming from. So however that can be reflected, I'm open to.
Great. I see more hands, or I don't know if it's old ones. Secretary Castro Ramirez and Director Blanco Kliber. Lynn.
Sorry, Chair. My hand. No additional comments on my end. Thank you.
Lynn, and then Secretary Crawford.
So I guess just two points that I would make. One is that I very much hear the direction around action and using kind of this moment to make sure that we're all invested in taking those steps. I think that we have the right people here at the table. We have a representation from Cal EPA. We have also our senior program folks from SGC who are here listening to this conversation and really hear the urgency and the intentionality of the comments. I think that my preference is for the language that I proposed, because I think it also gives us that space to be able to go through the stakeholder engagement process, where I think we also need to make sure that we have we don't presuppose the outcomes of the awards. We really focus this conversation and this action item on really really unpacking the quantification methodologies and the scoring to be able to really represent what's happening in the state and what we're seeing in the data. So that would be my kind of recommendation is around where the language falls, and then also the commitment from myself and my team to take this very seriously and to go through this process and engage with the key partners in an urgent fashion.
Okay.
Great. So I'm going to just remind council members, this is very important, obviously, but we have a number of other items on the agenda. And I'll just jump to Secretary Crawford and Deputy Secretary D'Souza. If you could just quickly summarize what you want to.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I would support the director's proposed language, and I think that does provide us the space to consider, how might the scoring criteria change, and acknowledging comments like the one we got from a member of the public through the Q&A function around the inclusion of active transportation being considered. I would say I also want to acknowledge Councilmember Capratz's concern about the methodology that she's voiced in previous rounds, and so one potential solution, not for discussion now, would be a report back from SGC staff around the methodology development. So before the methodology gets set and we're looking at another set of proposals for the next round, there's an opportunity for a public conversation about any changes that are being made and the purposes of those changes. So that's just a suggestion.
Great. Yeah, yes.
Great. I see Deputy Secretary D'Souza, you took your hands up. So Lynn, could you repeat that motion one more time, and then we will move ahead and get a second and vote on that.
It is direct the AHSC team to evaluate scoring and quantification methodologies to reflect regional differences.
And can we just add to report back with any proposed changes?
And report back to the council with any proposed changes.
Councilmember Capretz, would you take that as a friendly amendment to your motion?
Oh, yeah, sorry, Wade.
My
only friendly amendment would be,
yeah, go ahead.
Report back to the council prior to the finalization of the next round, the methodology for the next round.
Yeah, okay. I would suggest that to be a separate and sort of directive to staff rather than a motion. Do we?
Oh.
Versus adding it to Lynn's. I thought Secretary Crawford was saying separate from this, we'll ask SGC staff to report back. I'm confused whether it's part of the motion or.
I'm open to whether it's in the motion, as long as, I mean, the director, if the director can, commit to doing that and provide that report and allow for the discussion prior to the finalization. That seems like the, most appropriate approach.
Okay, then let's just add it onto the motion.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So moved.
Second.
I would second that.
You were the second last time, so renew your second.
Okay.
Okay, there's a motion and a second on the table.
Great. Roll call.
Chair Acefa?
Yes.
Deputy Secretary D'Souza?
Yes.
Councilmember Capretz?
Yes.
Secretary Castro Ramirez?
Yes.
Secretary Crowfoot?
Yep. Yes.
Councilmember Flatt?
Yes.
Deputy Secretary Jameson?
Yes.
Deputy Secretary Musavi?
Yes.
Chancellor Munoz?
Aye.
Deputy Director Starr?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Great. I again want to congratulate the recipients, the 37 recipients of this award. Again, a historic moment for this program. That is really exciting. And then thank you as well, Councilmember Capretz, and comments from the public as well, relevant to improving this process and the criteria. So now we will move to item number 7, which is an action item. I would like to invite Director Lynn Von Koch-Libert again and Kiran Kumar, Deputy Director of Equity and Government Transformation, to present on item 7. Lynn?
Great, thank you. And Karen and I are going to work very quickly to get us back on track with time. So please bear with us as we kind of go through our material very quickly. Okay, so just a reminder that in the beginning of this year, we instituted a new structure within the Strategic Growth Council called Council Priorities. And this will be the second council priority that we are bringing to the council. So council priorities are really areas that have a high impact at scale, that are pressing and critical importance, and that benefit from the unique cabinet level council approach that this body brings to bear. We also are looking for places and ideas that are demonstrated and tested successful models. So along these lines, technical assistance and capacity building have long been a priority strategy for the Strategic Growth Council. And we've seen an increase in access to our fundings when technical assistance has been applied. Over the years, we've expanded our TA programs to include close partnerships with many of the agencies like CARB STEP, CFA's Healthy Soils, Caltrans LC Top, and the TEIRCP programs, as well as independently programs such as BCSH's HomeKey, which has also demonstrated successful results from TA approaches. And as noted by Deputy Secretary DeSouza, as the TA work has evolved, we've realized that there's increasingly a need to focus on capacity building in some of the state's most under-resourced communities, while also identifying ways to increase access to programs on the state side. So last year, we shared an exciting update on one of our pilot capacity building programs, Boost, which leveraged $1 million investment into nearly $50 million in new grants from local, state, and federal sources. An example of how capacity building is not only a key equity strategy, but a financially smart investment in communities. Today's item will build on SGC's work, as well as the work happening within many of your agencies to more effectively create the conditions that enable communities from historic investment across the state programs. At this point, I'll hand over to Kiran Kumar, who's the Deputy Director of Equity and Government Transformations.
Thanks so much, Lynn, and good afternoon, Chair Sefa and members of the council. I've been asked to move quickly, so apologize if I sound more like an auctioneer than a public servant. We don't need to do contents. Let's just move to the next slide, Lois. So today's recommended action, similar to the council's past leadership on racial equity, is to adopt a resolution to further promote and integrate capacity building across the Strategic Growth Council and member agency initiatives. And so additionally to Deputy Secretary D'Souza's earlier point, the resolution is a recognition that beyond just capacity building with and across communities, the state also must take concerted action to remove the barriers that limit access to funding, either through complicated and hard to access grant programs or structural challenges that exclude smaller communities, community-based organizations, and other potential beneficiaries. So before going too far, it is really important to level set around what we mean by capacity building. There are a lot of definitions and approaches out there, but I think within the context of the state's approach, capacity building is the process of strengthening local coordination, leadership, and others to access resources with the goal of helping to develop or increase a community's ability to compete for grants and implement future projects. It's not just about filling gaps within staffing at local governments, which is incredibly important, a major part of this, but it involves a whole of community approach that is both transforms conditions from the top down so that all communities can participate and lead on climate actions, as well as bottom up to support building network capacity and social infrastructure. So as you all are well aware, SGC has long held that technical assistance and capacity building is a key tenet of our theory of change in terms of creating more access to funding in under-resourced communities. Like Lynn mentioned, we partnered with almost all of your agencies to fund or co-implement exciting TA programs. And last year, the council took a major step in formalizing technical assistance guidelines for state agencies that we've been working to implement across the board. And so rather than hearing more from me, to help underscore the importance of this work, we've invited our stellar third-party evaluation team to share findings from the recently released midpoint assessment. And so I'll turn it over to Theo Leanman and Daniela Flores from Harder & Company now.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting Harder & Company Community Research to join for today's item. My name is Theo Leanman, and I'm part of the evaluation team researching the efficacy of California Climate Investment's technical assistance programs. I just wanted to quickly acknowledge that in addition to Daniela Flores, who's here to present with me today, we're part of a great team that we couldn't have presented this work without. Our director, Dr. Amy Ramos, and two wonderful assistants, Madeline Rayon and Liz Lev. We've had the privilege of getting to understand the diverse grant making and technical assistance offered and supported by the Strategic Growth Council through a variety of methods, which I'll describe on the next slide. Our research design included 6 different methods to inform our learnings: a review of all previous documentation on CCI TA programs, TA provider and TA recipient interviews in 2 rounds, a TA recipient survey, which reached a total of 84 participants from each region of California serviced by CCITA. We are currently conducting geographic information systems mapping, which allows us to examine whether SGC funds are or aren't reaching disadvantaged communities throughout California, since TA should improve their application prospects. And excitingly, some interview respondents have agreed to participate in video case studies, which will result in publicly distributed short messaging to elevate CCITA activities and opportunities. Next slide.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, Honorable Chair, council members, and everyone in attendance. I'll jump in here to share briefly some trends from our midpoint assessment, along with illustrative quotations from TA recipients to give you a feel for how the technical assistance has impacted the folks that are benefiting from TA services. Overall, respondents signaled a strong appreciation for the TA. For example, we heard from 82% of the TA recipients that responded to our survey that TA increased their ability to advance equity-related goals. Related to the first finding displayed on the slide on increased awareness of climate change goals, one respondent from the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities TA stated that, quote, the AHSC application and TA program greatly increased our organization's awareness and knowledge of climate change issues. As a result, we will look to implement project design features that combat and are better suited to deal with climate change. Next slide. TA is more than just direct application assistance, which is important. It's also about building the capacity of recipients to sustain learning and apply knowledge and skills to areas outside of their singular grants. One of the key components of capacity building is the ability of TA recipients to make partnerships that fill organizational skill gaps, complement their project visions, and also increase the likelihood of successful grant implementation. With respect to partnerships, we found that 80% of the TA respondents credited the technical assistance to supporting strengthened partnerships with local stakeholders and with non-traditional partners. 77% also agreed that the TA supported more competitive applications due to that increased capacity to build and maintain those partnerships, and also support more meaningful community engagement to advance equity goals. Here we include a quote from TCC TA recipient that credits the assistance to help them build and model for community-based grant applications where the community is engaged and has the space to voice the community assets and needs during the development of the grant application that also prioritizes multi-partnership collaboration. I'll transition it back to my colleague Theo, who will wrap this presentation up by sharing some of the ongoing capacity building needs.
Thanks, Daniela. Of course, it's also part of our charge as evaluators to point to areas of possible improvement. Some of the ongoing needs for continued capacity building include continuing to target TA to the most vulnerable communities, since larger, better resource organizations can already effectively apply for grant opportunities. Improve efforts to advise multi-benefit projects that bring together diverse stakeholders around a common funding goal. Increase TA's focus on local providers who can tailor locally meaningful applications that are aligned with SGC opportunities. And finally, continue outreach and awareness of grant programs and accompanying TA opportunities. We want to thank you for hearing our brief presentation on CCITA. We know that this was a lot of information in a short amount of allotted time, so we're happy to stick around to answer any questions that come up during public or commission comments.
Thank you so much, Theo and Daniela. Just 2 quick points I wanted to make on that. One is that the midpoint assessment is out publicly, and so we'll make sure that SGC is promoting that so folks can see the full findings. And then the other point for the council is that we didn't just look at SGC technical assistance programs. We looked at programs where we are partnering with all of your agencies. So that includes CDFA's Healthy Soils program, the CARB STEP program, Caltrans's LC-TOP Intercept program. So this really is representative of this cross-agency collaboration. Next slide, please, Lois. So before moving to the resolution itself, I wanted to highlight the time-sensitive need for this action. informed by our listening and engagement done through to inform the technical assistance guidelines and the Regional Climate Collaboratives program, as well as pilots like Boost and Partners Advancing Climate Equity, it's really clear that communities are hungry for capacity building resources now. We heard it earlier in a public comment from Anita. Primarily with close to $40 billion in funding proposed within the Governor's California Blueprint, as well as significant federal funding to tackle key policy priorities relevant to this council, our long-standing commitments to equity really call on us to ensure that communities across the state can benefit from this historic investment and implement community-led and project development processes. And then also not included in the slide, but reflected within the resolution itself, is the need to not only build capacity externally, but reassess the barriers that exist within state government that limit access to critical resources. We know that topics like timeliness of payment and advanced pay, reporting and evaluation requirements, and language access often come up as challenges around pursuing funding. So today's resolution is modeled after the Council's 2020 Racial Equity Resolution. The Council today would be committing to taking concrete steps to integrate capacity building and technical assistance across programs, policies, and practices, specifically identifying strategies to benefit California Native American tribes and under-resourced communities, working to align and streamline efforts within agencies and across, and then finally, utilizing this public venue as a forum to elevate progress, share best practices, and gather further public input. And then coming out of today's council action, staff will enact several processes to further advance these commitments. First, similar to the council's racial equity working group, we'll convene a working group that builds on existing structures that inform the technical assistance guidelines and more recently the Regional Climate Collaboratives program. And then we'll work with your agencies through this structure to identify existing and potential opportunities to promote capacity building, while also identifying and addressing those persistent barriers that we've talked a little bit about today. And then it's also important to note that this work dovetails really well with the proposed Office of Community Partnerships and Strategic Communications within the Governor's California Blueprint that Chair Acefa mentioned earlier. And so we will identify opportunities for collaboration and ways to amplify capacity building as a key strategy across our work. And then finally, we'll re-engage the council to share updates and further this interagency collaboration. Next slide. So to wrap up, today's recommended action is that the council move to adopt a resolution to further promote and integrate capacity building across the Strategic Growth Council and member agency initiatives. Thanks.
And before we hand back to the chair, part of the council priority structure, we do invite council members to volunteer to be champions, to help us be able to lead the strategy and the implementation of this important work. So Chair Acefa, back to you.
Great. Thank you, Kieran and team. Again, this is one really critical and important work for SGC, I think for all of us in terms of how we can continue to advance equity, especially access to opportunities and removing barriers for communities of color, especially, and capacity building is a key, making that a key strategy and then keep working to improve that is critical. And thank you for staff's analysis and recommendations. So with that, I would initiate council comments on this item. I have a few, Deputy Secretary Jemison, then Secretary Crawford, and then Council Member Mike Flatt.
Great. Thank you, Chair Acefa, and thanks for the presentation, Kieran. Even though Secretary Ross was really sorry she couldn't be here today, she did want to convey that she very much wants to be a champion for capacity building and technical assistance. And to the point that Kieran made about how much money is coming down the pipeline, and we really need to make sure that we have infrastructure on the ground to get that money out into our communities. It takes a lot of effort to roll out all of our agencies' various programs, and that technical assistance is key to making sure that they're successful, particularly with regards to priority populations, socially disadvantaged communities, and farmers and ranchers. So CDFA is absolutely committed to continuing to provide technical assistance. And what we need to figure out is the financing to make sure that the TA is long lasting, that'll continue to have an impact on program implementation. And we also need to be realistic in the effort it takes to implement our projects, particularly in rural areas, disadvantaged communities, where folks are tremendously under-resourced, and to think about how we can support them in developing projects that align with our aspirations and theirs and meet their real world needs. Just one last thing, Secretary Ross also conveyed that she's hoping SGC will consider hosting a technical assistance provider summit for all of our agencies and programs to help everyone understand the need and long-term benefit of dedicating these significant sums to technical assistance and capacity building and pre-development work like planning, so that we can adequately support the folks who are going after our grant dollars. And back to you, Chair.
Great. Secretary Crawford.
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to just compliment the SGC staff on the rigor of their analysis around the benefit of TA and capacity building. Really impressed. And there's a whole lot more analysis than what was presented in that, the short presentation today. I too, want to be a champion, however I can, for ensuring that one legacy we leave in the Newsom administration is we institutionalize technical assistance and capacity building, not as a best practice, but as a standard practice. And I think we're already got a great head start with the work that the SGC is doing and the platform and the hub that the SGC provides. I'd like to see executive level commitment and making clear to our executive teams that we want to partner across agencies to really understand the best approaches and then standardize those approaches. And to me, it requires three things. One, making sure that we have the funding, and to Virginia's point that we have the funding over time to allow for continued continuity of TA and capacity building. Two, that we really do internalize what is sort of the best practices, and I said make them the standard practices. And then three, that we institutionalize this across grant programs. Our agency, Natural Resources, we're giving away billions of dollars every year, and I think historically, we haven't provided for the equity of access because of a lack of TA and capacity building. So I think this can be a real game changer toward achieving the equity that I know we're all committed to. And so sign me up for really leaning in and doing work outside of this meeting to achieve what the SGC the vision is.
Great, thanks. Councilmember Flatt.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I just want to add my desire to serve as a champion also. I am really, really enthusiastic about this work. If I could harness Public Member Capretz's energy towards geographic equity, that's what I would funnel towards technical assistance. Having served as I've served as a city manager, and I've served in under-resourced communities and resourced communities, and we just lack the capacity and the technical expertise to be competitive in this grant arena. I typically say, I'm too busy digging with a spoon to go buy a shovel, or in this case, I'm too busy digging with a spoon to write a grant to get a shovel that I could dig more efficiently. And it's an equity issue, absolutely. And really, really excited. Congratulations on the work that was done. I'm not surprised at how successful the program has been, but really appreciate Lynn and Kieran taking the time to get a feedback loop in place that tells you exactly how successful our programs are, and then the areas where we need to continue to improve. And I think a lot of folks that are probably on this Zoom take for granted that those feedback loops are in place, and it's just really, really critical. So congratulations. I don't want to spend too much time. I'm enthusiastic about whatever role I can play and whatever work I can do. I'm happy to dedicate towards this effort.
Great, thanks, Mike. Secretary Castro Ramirez, you're up.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Chair. I strongly support this resolution and commend the team for engaging a third party to do this assessment. I would just add to the comments that have already been shared that capacity building and providing technical assistance has also made us much stronger as a state in our role as policymakers, in our role as program administrators, in our role in terms of working with communities. So I think that it's not just about investing and working to provide TA at the local level, but what it does to our staff in terms of the learning and the opportunity for growth and the opportunity for us to change kind of the paradigm in terms of how we are accustomed to working with local communities, local jurisdictions. I will say that I think a key element of the success within the Home Key initiative was very much embedded in the technical assistance and the partnership that was created by the HCD staff working with local communities, very much with a sort of vested interest in seeing their success in converting, these hotels and motels to affordable housing units for people experiencing homelessness. So as we all know, this groundbreaking program in a matter of 6 months created 6,000 permanent and interim housing units. And the partnership that was developed by the staff, and I'll just kind of toot HCD's horn here, but they created this model called, basically HCD team were ambassadors. They were working with these local communities to understand their vision, to understand their approach, and to kind of work together to get them to the finish line. And I think that level of technical assistance and capacity building spirit really is embedded across state agencies and departments. And that's what we will need to continue to channel as we continue to invest these historic levels of funding that are being made available, not just by our state, but also by the federal government, right? So to Secretary Crowfoot's comments earlier, a legacy of the work that we're doing is the capacity building, the collaboration, and the win-win in forming these different level of relationships with community members that are securing dollars to be able to carry out their projects, but also the information and the knowledge base that we're building as public service and in our capacities as policymakers and program administrators. Fully support the resolution, and I thank you again, Lynn, for your leadership in the work of the team and the third party that conducted this assessment. Thank you.
Great. Any other comment? I see a hand from Deputy Secretary, Director Starr.
Thank you. So many different titles.
I know.
Just echo all the great comments. We're of course thrilled to see this attention to equitable community capacity building, and really a big thank you to council members Ross, Crowfoot, and Flad for taking the lead on this. And I just want to add that our staff in AHHS, as well as in the Department of Public Health, will be very pleased to support the effort to help identify and overcome some of the barriers to robust community engagement. And many of those have been identified in the presentation, so I won't repeat them here. But we're here to help, and so let us know if we can. And I'll just add that we had a fairly robust written comment submitted on this item before the meeting from the Greenlining Institute, kind of a 10-page review of some of the considerations. So that may be of use to this process as we go forward too. It seemed very well done and thought-provoking, both top-down and bottom-up strategies and many other good suggestions.
Great, thank you. Mark, any other comments from council members? Otherwise, I'll jump to public comments. Great, so we will, before we make a motion, we will open it up to public comments now. Emily? And I just want to Deputy Director Starr's point, there is a letter, actually there are several letters on this item, and I'll ask that they be included in the record of this meeting as well. Is that Emily?
Great, thank you so much, Chair Safa. So this is just a friendly reminder, if you are interested in leaving public comment for agenda item number 6, you can do so by completing the form at sgc.ca.gov/meetings. Again, remembering to submit separate forms for separate agenda items. So with that, each speaker is going to have 2 minutes to make their remarks. If you're online, you'll see a timer pop up on your screen. Please monitor that and wrap up with your remarks accordingly. Whether you are online or on the phone, you will be notified when your time is up. And then after that, we will mute your microphone. So I'm going to begin the public comment period by reading the names of everyone who's signed up for the comment on this item. So we have 4 individuals signed up for agenda item number 7. So those individuals are, let's see here, Emmy Wang with the Green Lining Institute, Victor Bias, Natalie Hernandez, Bryn Lindblad, and Anita Lopez. So with that, again, when you hear your name, please raise your hand in Zoom. You can do this by clicking raise hand under the participants menu, which you can find at the bottom of your screen on the Zoom platform, or by pressing *9 if you're joining by phone. So let's go ahead and start with Emmy Wang, Green Lining Institute, Associate Director of Capacity Building. Emmy, I will turn it over to you. Please unmute yourself.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Emmy Wang with the Green Lining Institute. Calling in to offer a summary of our written public comment. Very much appreciate the opportunity. Green Lining, we are a racial justice policy org, and at Green Lining, I lead our capacity building team. This is our team focused on supporting under-resourced communities to develop the capacity to lead on their own local transformations. And so because of that, we are very much therefore very encouraged to see the council consider this resolution on capacity building. Just to set the context a little bit, right? We know that under-resourced communities urgently want to take advantage of available funds and policies to advance climate equity, but our neighborhoods are the very same neighborhoods that have been impacted by generational disparities and that have also been excluded from the decision-making processes that impact their lives. So as the state considers capacity building as a key equity strategy, we offer 3 primary recommendations. Number 1, capacity building and technical assistance are important tools, but they are tools that must be paired with the whole of government approach and theory of change that is connected to a larger policy aim for the state, right? To what larger purpose are these capacity building activities being carried out? So for us, and as Kieran mentioned, it's clear to us that capacity building must be threaded into both a systems approach and a grassroots road. So number 2, at the systems level, we see that capacity building requires grounding systemic state policy changes directly in community identified needs, leaderships, and solutions. The state must continue transforming behaviors, institutions, and systems that disproportionately harm under-resourced areas. And this is everything from, I would say, really big picture policy to a lot of the items that we've already talked about today, like grant guidelines and advance payment of funds. And then number 3, at a grassroots level, the state must meaningfully partner with under-resourced communities to advance California's climate actions locally. This looks like supporting communities to identify their own needs and visions, develop partnerships, build skills, access capacity building and technical assistance resources, and advance local equitable climate projects. So with that, I will stop there. We are very encouraged to see the council consider this resolution and look forward to continuing to work with the council. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. So next we'll move to Victor Bias. Victor, if you'd like to go ahead and unmute yourself, we'll start your time.
Hello, my name is Victor Bias from Comité Cívico del Valle, a community-based organization located in Imperial County. It has been stated that a state-provided technical assistance has been essential in ensuring that disadvantaged low-income communities and California Native American tribes can access the tools, resources, and funding necessary to support equitable, community-driven transformation. In Imperial County, Comité Cívico del Valle works with its partners to build capacity and address issues in our disadvantaged communities. With state-provided technical assistance, which we've received in some areas, we know that partners and other community organizations in the region can grow and we can help the community. For example, in Imperial County, it depends on the agriculture industry, and many of our farmers and field workers work long hours and are unable to or too tired to engage and keep themselves informed. So we have to build capacity to reach them and make sure they have access to available resources, identify and report needs, problems, or violations. On top of that, Many members of our community face language barrier due to the only speaking Spanish, excuse me. And we face this other challenges to locate resources in Spanish, because when resources or information are in English, we have to translate and distribute them in order to reach those Spanish-speaking communities. Last but not least, most of our local CBOs are either short-staffed or resource limited due to lack of funding and ability to apply for grants. Technical assistance and capacity building programs can address this issue and address the inequity of resources across the state by leveling and playing field for communities like ours. Having said that, if the state wants to reach its climate, EJ, and equity goals in helping the most vulnerable communities, then the state provide technical assistance and capacity building program needs to be implemented and funded. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, so next we'll move to Natalie Hernandez with Climate Resolve. Natalie, if you'd like to unmute yourself, we'll start your time.
Hello, Chair and Council members. My name is Natalie Hernandez from the organization Climate Resolve. I want to say that though the resolution has good intention, I'm a little appalled by how much is lacking in the resolution to be a two-way approach. One, provide TA and capacity, but two, to also overhaul administrative processes and grant programs that prevent under-resourced communities and California Native American tribes from applying. Maybe I'm just being picky about the language, but in the resolution and staff report, it reiterates several times that many communities lack readiness to pursue grant funding, but I don't think that's always the case. Many state agencies are the ones that actually lack the readiness to give the communities the funding. Several of you have mentioned this today, but it's not included in the resolution. I'm a TA provider myself for 3 SGC programs, the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program, the BOOST program, and Partners Advancing Climate Equity. And I also work on other state grants. So I can provide a few examples. For one, I've had to jump through hoops myself to get community engagement stipends approved for resident advisory groups, or get separate funding for food and survey gift cards. Advance pay is limited and almost all grants are reimbursement based. I appreciate being a TA provider, but want to let you know that TA and capacity building not just get at the root issues of what's actually needed to overhaul the way that the state does equitable grant programs. And this is what the resolution lacks. Moving forward, I want to recognize the work that has been done informally between the state agencies and TA providers after each grant process to evaluate guidelines through listening sessions. That has been effective. Similarly, giving money to capacity building cohort programs like PACE, BOOST, and AHSC, where peers learn from each other and regional connections are made, are where I see the most potential for impact and return on investment. It warms my heart to be a part of these programs, and I genuinely want them to improve over time to really respond to community needs. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that public comment. So next we're going to move to Bryn Lindblad, also with Climate Resolve. Bryn, if you'd like to unmute yourself, we'll start your time.
Thank you. Good afternoon, council members. I'm Natalie's colleague from Climate Resolve in Los Angeles, and I'd like to start by thanking you for voicing the commitment that we've heard this afternoon to really institutionalizing and having that legacy of building an enduring capacity building approach that continues to improve and grow. It's a real trailblazing area, and happy to be a part of that ourselves as TA providers and capacity builders. We really like to see a lot more community-driven climate action that's built on grassroots community values, coming from an asset-based approach where you're tapping into that community energy. And so to get there, needing to kind of build connections between those grassroots frontline community priorities and state funding programs, and see a need to kind of build a bridge in both directions there. So not just focusing on TA that's specific to the funding programs to help sort of navigate grant applications, but would also really like to see a simplification of those grant application processes and capacity building programs such as the PACE program to help frontline community leaders gain access to tools and develop skills that help them be effective table setters and developers of community solutions and partners with government. I'd like to note that the survey that was presented at the top of this agenda item only had 12% participation from CBOs. And Kieran mentioned some barriers that are out there. Natalie mentioned as well, like reimbursement, payment format, and not funding. Food and childcare continue to be barriers to support community-led community efforts. So, I think it's not just communities that lack grant readiness, but there's also some government lacking community readiness here. And just the last second, kudos to Green Lining's letter. They're a real thought leader in capacity building and systems change, and hope you all give it a thorough read. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. So we'll move to Anita Lopez with Soy Lopez Consulting. If you'd like to unmute yourself, we'll start your time.
Thank you all so much, and thank you for letting me speak again today. I'm speaking on behalf of the cohort who has worked collaboratively with everybody who just spoke, and would say that I think in addition to looking at technical assistance and capacity building for funding streams, to echo Secretary Crowfoot's kind of comment is, ensuring that the money is there. And one of the best practices that I've seen in terms of funding and funding related, non-government funding related, is to have a requirement that a percentage of all awards get assigned to the needed areas. So sometimes that's evaluation. Sometimes that is community needs and assessments. And so while looking at your RFPs, how much of that are you asking of this money to be set aside for capacity building? I think that would be a great addition to your RFPs and funding, and an easier way, a more immediate way to really start considering how do you build these programs into the existing funding, but also taking that conversation higher up and saying that we actually just need its separate funding so that these programs can be in existence, continuously improved and evaluated. But also, how do you make it simple? And how do we make it so that even the community members that don't have the degrees, the jargon, the youngest ones who will be leading this work can actually get engaged? And that's where my commitment is really thinking about how does this translate to community rather than just how does the community benefit? Because it does take all of us to lead this work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So with that, I will pass it back to Chair Acefa. That concludes our public comment for agenda item number 7.
Thank you again, everyone who testified and provided constructive feedback, as well as those who sent letters. Now I will open it up for council. Is there a motion and a second to adopt the resolution on advancing capacity building as a key equity strategy?
So moved. Or second.
So moved by Deputy Director Starr and seconded by whom?
Mike Flood.
By Councilmember Flood. Matt?
Thank you, Chair. Chair Acefa?
Yes.
Deputy Secretary D'Souza?
Yes.
Councilmember Capretz?
Yes.
Secretary Castro Ramirez?
Yes.
Secretary Crowfoot?
Yes.
Councilmember Flad?
Yes.
Deputy Secretary Jameson?
Yes.
Deputy Secretary Musavi?
Yes.
Chancellor Munoz?
Yes.
Deputy Director Starr?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Great. We will move to item number 8. I'll just remind council members we're about half an hour behind schedule, half an hour to 40. But the next item is a discussion item. Moving to item 8, which is a discussion of
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just a very quick comment. And I saw also my colleague, Secretary Crowfoot's hand was up first.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
Yes.
Sorry.
No, please, I'll go after you.
Okay, I was just going to mention the comments during the public comment portion on this item were very rich in offering additional recommendations for us to consider. And so I would just ask if, as you know, the staff continue to look at ways to embed stronger capacity building into our equity strategies, that we take into account some of the comments that were raised today during the public comment portion.
Yeah, and I was just going to say totally ditto on that. I mean, what we can't do is have a conversation with ourselves in government and then pat ourselves on the back for, you know, doing what we think we're trying to do, but really listen to the folks out there providing the TA and the capacity building and really understanding what are the barriers. And some of them are really tricky barriers that are just, you know, that we will need to take on. So totally with you. And I think we all agree, you know, one of our first steps in terms of deepening this work is continuing to learn from the folks that are out there in communities.
Great, thank you both for emphasizing that. Again, there's a lot of rich feedback, including the written feedbacks that I've read are really a lot of constructive feedback to continue to improve our work in this space. So item 8 is a discussion item on sustainable agricultural lands conservation programs policy and direction. And I will ask Kylie E. Bright from Division Director of Land Resource Protection at the Department of Conservation to present on this item. KV.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chair Osefa. It is it's pronounced Kaylee, which is nearly impossible for many, and that's fine. But I'm happy to counsel people. So, all right, so I'll take it from here. So good afternoon, Chair Osefa and council members, and I'm kind of recognizing the late hour on this meeting. I'll try to go through my slides quickly today. And next slide, please. So today I was going to give you all an overview of the SALT program, kind of walk through its statutory and policy goals, and then bring to you two kind of policy questions that we're grappling with within the program to help inform our guideline development that we will bring to you all at a later date. Next slide. One more slide, please. Okay, so with the SALT program, it is a tremendous program. There's no other land conservation program like it in government, because we have, you know, we're co-funded with housing, we have stable funding, and we can meet a whole bunch of different goals. But keeping that in mind, it's really important to always understand that SALT has two principal statutory goals that drive the program. The first is the program is meant to protect the state's most productive farmlands from development risk, and development risk that really results in the higher greenhouse gas emissions from that development. The second goal, which is equally important to always keep up at the front, is that the SALT program is meant to reinforce and support the state's infill and housing density goals. That is a fundamental baseline to how we develop our program guidelines, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. Next slide. So beyond our statutory goals, the program has always just really been driven to accomplish a suite of multiple environmental and social benefits. This is something that was, you know, built into the program from its first years, but has been really reinforced with the addition of many statewide policy directives, either through statute or from you know, agencies within within the Strategic Growth Council. Things like, you know, supporting the different aspects of food supply, conserving habitat, providing open space, providing training for our farmers and providing land access for farmers, building community assets like recreation, education, all these things that really build into the importance of the program. And not to mention, just a whole suite of climate resilience benefits in using the land, but also carbon sequestration as well. Next slide. So really quickly, I wanted to just jump into program accomplishments, and first start with the big numbers. And sorry, there's a train going by my house, so it might get loud. But going with the big numbers, the SOLID program since 2014 has been able to protect 143,000 acres of land. We always hear these big numbers, but for some scale, and that is about the size of Sacramento and Stockton combined in landmass area, or half the size of the city of Los Angeles. So these are massive gains in land conservation. And through that process, we next slide, please. We really want to not just tally acres. I'm showing off a big pile of acres right there, but we really are trying to think about how we can make investments in the most strategic way to get the most bang for the buck. And that's something that is really driven by how we write our guidelines and how we kind of ask our partners, how we solicit project requests from our partners. So I wanted to set up these questions with a little bit of context. In 2014, the program started off with a fairly generalized approach of trying to, request project applications from its partners that protected high value ag lands. It also delivered, many environmental co-benefits. Since that point, as I mentioned, there have been, a whole host of, honestly, just like historic and groundbreaking policy initiatives around natural working lands, around housing, around social equity, all sorts of things that have come into play to help, shape our program and seek opportunities to use our program to accomplish those different goals. The way that our program has largely responded to that call is that we have, continually refined our program in the quantity and the granularity of the types of attributes from a project that we wanted to see as they came through the door. I think what's important right now is that we're bringing these next two issues to you because we're kind of at this critical tipping point for the program where I think we've taken this approach of like refining and making things more granular, like down as far as it can go. And we are really hearing from our partners that it's just getting harder and harder for them to make that cost benefit decision to like apply for the program because of the complexity and understand whether or not their projects are going to be competitive enough for the grants for them to value the time to go through the process of applying. We as a program, we're also questioning, we're honestly questioning, we're reflecting on whether this added complexity in the end delivers, corresponding gains in, the quality of the product we're delivering to the council in terms of the whole investment package. So we're trying to kind of grapple with those questions, and we're doing so at this really interesting historic moment where right now we anticipate, historic levels of funding coming into SALT in this round of funding that's going to come up and be driven by these guidelines. And that historic round of funding is coming at the same time that this administration is really solidifying its policy directives around natural working lands, around biodiversity, around housing, these just cornerstone issues that are the pillars of the program. So I think that these two issues, while they can come off as kind of technical and wonky, I think they're really critical for us when we think about how can we really leverage this program to take advantage of this opportunity of high funding and really show how this program can, push the needle on how we achieve these goals across these different policy initiatives. So next slide, please. So the first question I wanted to bring to you all is, how do we achieve our multiple benefits? Right now, and this has been common practice across natural resources programs from my experience, as long as I've worked with them, it's, we really prioritize the achievement of multiple benefits from on a project by project basis. We do this in a really, like I said, kind of in an itemized way where we develop criteria and we score the project based on the number and types of benefits that those projects achieve. And while that it gives us a lot of protection as staff and as a program that we're gonna end up with individual projects with a lot of benefits, it doesn't always guarantee that you're going to result in like the best benefits in the whole investment package. And one of the losers, frankly, of this approach has been those lands with the highest agricultural value, our prime farmlands that may not have the habitat and other benefits that other lands may have. So we're seeing prime farmlands kind of get screened out of a program that was statutorily created to protect agricultural land, which I know was not the intent, but it's one of those unfortunate outcomes. And we, next slide, please. So the question I wanted to bring to you is, and get your guidance on is, whether we should shift how we manage the achievement of multiple benefits. And what I'm proposing here is moving from this project by project approach to something more akin to an investment portfolio approach where, the staff has more flexibility to build a portfolio of strong projects that represent, the benefits that we want to capture within a multi-benefit outcome. But one that would allow for us to bring in, let's say, strong singular benefit like prime farmland, to combine that with something more diversified, like, really rich rangeland with habitat and ag and all those other values. We want to be able to come to the council with an investment package that really represents all that this program can do, and we're kind of hamstrung by that right now. A positive approach, like I've mentioned to this, would be, we would probably see more of these projects that are being, screened out, like a prime farmland project be included. I think that the real downside for us is that you get when you insert discretion into a process, you open yourself up to risk and critique, and we would have to really be thoughtful about how we made decisions so that we weren't seen as having too much inconsistency and without sound thought behind the decisions. Next slide, please. So moving on, and I'm going to go through both of these and then kind of step back for feedback. So the next issue I wanted to raise with you was development risk factors. So going back to that original statutory goal, the SALT program is funded through, it's funded through housing funding, and it has a statutory requirement to support the state's housing goals. So through money and through law, it is bound to the housing goals of our state. And so the way that we think about an agricultural land conservation program that meets housing goals is we're trying to conserve those lands that are in the, to strategically kind of stop sprawl and try to support infill and more concentrated development. We frankly don't have really sophisticated ways to do this. We use a linear distance metric, 2 miles for urban areas and 5 miles for rural development to assess whether or not a property is in kind of immediate risk of development. And while that is clean, crisp and clean, and gives us like this assurances that these are really close to development, so they're probably going to be in the path. We're hearing kind of two things. First, we're hearing that there's, this emerging issue of telecommuting is totally upending the drivers of development and changing how risk is occurring on rural lands for development. Influencing factors around that include things like broadband access, increased commute tolerance, less frequent commutes, proximity to recreation, and really a whole host of other factors that locals have probably more close insights than we can gather. I do want to underscore with this issue that it is emerging, and we really don't have great data on this trend. And this is something in our conversations with staff, SGC staff and key staff, it's like, we're going to really benefit from when good data comes from housing and transportation agencies to kind of give us more information about how these development patterns are changing. But we don't have that yet, and things are happening. The other thing we're also, seeing is that we have these short linear distance metrics for, the most at-risk properties, but we also are seeing the path of development going into those adjacent lands as well. And the way the program is developed now is we don't have the flexibility to really look at those lands that are adjacent to the lands that are most risk. So 10 miles, 15 miles out, which all of us know is well within an area of driving distance for the things we want to see from the city. Next slide. Okay, so the question, we would like to get guidance on whether the program, again, similar to multiple benefits, is if we should increase our flexibility around how staff evaluate development risk and looking at these projects. This could include working with locals on, understanding their understanding of development risk. It could look at factors like broadband or commute times, like I mentioned before, or it could mean, where it made sense, expanding beyond the current linear distance caps where appropriate. Decisions made as a group amongst not just individual staff, but as the whole team, and then kind of push through the SGC key staff team as well when we make those decisions, and then bring recommendations to the council for approval. A pro to this approach is that, you not only would you potentially capture properties that are actually at risk that were being screened out before, but you would be able to start to build kind of more of a localized understanding of development risks amongst our staff that work on these projects year over year. So, as projects come forward, you would have more, just instinct and expertise to evaluate those lands. And again, I think that the main con is that downside is that we would, discretion means that we may make decisions that others disagree with. Frankly, we may make decisions that are wrong sometimes. And we have to be ready to kind of build the right system around these decisions so that they can be defensible and, and defensible and, and find the right ways to test them. So with that, I'm going to leave it. I think that's the end of my presentation, and I will leave it to you for discussion. I'm here for questions if you have any. So thank you very much.
Thank you for that overview, Kaylee. I hope I did justice to your pronunciation this time, but thank you. That was really incredibly informative, and it also points to me sort of the bigger picture, why not only on the budget, but our coordination around sort of multiple benefit issues that the city is putting out now, from climate, from land conservation, from development capacity perspectives, both on funding and the programs, why it is really important that we coordinate and also evaluate how we, what are the benefits of one versus the other, and how do we judge that so that we don't work in silos on a slice of issue around conservation, housing, fire protection. So this is an important issue. Because this is a discussion item, I think council members, will be good to hear from the public as well before moving on to the discussions and some of the questions. So first, I'm going to open it up to public comments so that we can hear from the public. Unfortunately, I also have another very important item on coming up on another project that I'm half an hour late, but you'll be in very good hands with Deputy Director Nuntara Keys. She will take over from me during the public comments, but unfortunately, I will have to sign off because of that. But again, really very important decisions today, incredible feedback from the public and a lot of the issues that we are working on, and lots of humility as well. I think Secretary Crawford pointed it out, that we need to get out of our silos and double down on hearing from the public, especially on issues of equity, and the community know better what is impactful for them on the ground than us sitting in the office. So it was really a very good meeting and good feedback, and we will definitely build on that as we move forward. So with that, I'm going to ask Emily to run the public comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Acefa. So again, a friendly reminder of our public comment process for today's meeting. You can visit online at sgc.ca.gov/meetings to complete the public comment form there. Each speaker will have a maximum of 2 minutes to make their remarks. And if you're online, you'll see a timer pop up on your screen. Please make sure to monitor that, and we'll wrap up your remarks accordingly. Whether you're online or on the phone, you'll be notified when your time is up. And after that, we'll mute your microphone. You do not need to take any additional action at that point. So we are going to segue into, Lois, will you pull up our timer? So we have 2 individuals who have signed up for public comment on this agenda item. When you hear your name, please raise your hand in Zoom. You can do this by clicking raise hand under the participant menu, which you can find at the bottom of your screen on the Zoom platform, or by pressing *9 if you're joining by phone. And we've received comment cards from the following individuals. We have Nancy Schaefer from the California Rangeland Trust, as well as Jean Merrill from the California Climate and Agricultural Network. So you're going to have, again, 2 minutes to make your comment. Please raise your hand if you've not yet done so, and we'll begin public comment now with Nancy Schaefer. Nancy, please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, council members. I'm with the California Rangeland Trust, and we've been the beneficiary of numerous grants from the well-run SALT program, and we support its goals, including the infill development. But with each grant round, the guidelines have become more complicated and restrictive, so that some of our good easement projects are no longer eligible. And as a signatory to the January 12th CalCan letter that Jeannie, who's speaking next, will probably reference, it was sent to Department of Conservation and Strategic Growth Council, we agree with the recommendation to go back to earlier versions of the guidelines. We'd also like to see the return of the certificates of compliance risk option. This risk option allows our more rural ranches to be eligible while also meeting the goals of the program, avoiding increased vehicle miles traveled and providing agricultural, environmental, and economic benefits. These properties are at risk, often of rural ranchettes, and with the telecommuting issue that Kaylee pointed out, these could become even more important. So conserving these rural ranches also helps meet a lot of the state plans, including 30 by 30, nature-based solutions, California Water Plan, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. So next we're going to move to Jean Merrill from the California Climate and Agricultural Network. Jean, if you'd like to unmute yourself, we'll start your public comment period.
Right. Thank you, Chair and members. My name is Jeannie Merrill, Policy Director with the California Climate and Agriculture Network. We're a coalition of sustainable and organic agriculture organizations. We really greatly appreciate the staff's presentation today. It speaks to a number of issues we've been concerned with. We support maintaining the focus of SALC on protecting those agricultural lands at risk of urban sprawl and rural ranchette development as being part of the state's infill climate smart land strategy. But as others have noted, the SALC selection criteria have grown more detailed and varied over the years, and the number of points a project may receive for protecting at-risk agricultural land has declined. For example, in 2021, only 25% of the selection criteria points were awarded based on land with demonstrated development risks, compared to the potential of 37% of the points coming from projects demonstrating development risk in the 2018-19 program guidelines. Moreover, the more detailed selection criteria does require extensive work for applicants as they seek to gain the most points possible. And for small, under-resourced land trusts, this adds complexity to already resource-intensive application process. To support efforts to improve the reach of the program in under-resourced regions like the Inland Empire, the Southern San Joaquin Valley, Southern California, we'll need a more streamlined application process. And we support efforts to incentivize SALT projects that offer multiple environmental, public health, priority population, and economic benefits, but we don't want to lose the focus on protecting at-risk agricultural lands. We're intrigued by the staff's proposal today and look forward to discussing the details with them. We feel the discussion today is a great start to a very important issue for the program. And we are similarly interested in the discussion about more nuanced risk assessments for the program. And we look forward to diving into those details to help SALC continue to advance the state's climate smart land strategies. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Jeannie. So that concludes public comment for this agenda item. I will pass it back to Deputy Director Nguyen Tara Key.
Great, thank you so much for that and for all the public comment. We will now turn over to the council members for any discussion or feedback on the presentation and questions here that Kaylee proposed. So Secretary Crowfoot, I see your hand up.
Yeah, well, thank you for agendizing this. This is a really good example of how we can have public discussions on the criteria for, our grant programs. And I think it's germane to the conversation we had earlier in the meeting about really ensuring that we're all providing input on ultimately the criteria that gets used to bring the proposed projects to us. So I appreciate this. I also, really respect and support the idea that's driven the development of this program, which is multiple benefits. Our agency is driving hard on not only conserving open space and agricultural land, but obviously on conserving biodiversity and achieving a range of environmental goals, including carbon sequestration. So I really appreciate that. That being said, I think we in state government have a tendency to kind of make our programs more complex over time and creating sort of a calcified set of requirements that, seem like good improvements at the time, but then to the users of those programs or the applicants of those programs, they get so complicated that the program becomes really difficult to access. And it sounds like in this case, the very entities that really are best positioned to utilize this program are having more and more difficulty accessing it because of the way it's been structured over time. And to one commenter's point, areas that we really want to make sure can apply and can access this funding are going to have a harder time as a result of just how complicated this program's become. So I think my input would be, I think we need to invest some trust in our teams and at Department of Conservation and across agencies to streamline the criteria more and to really bring us a portfolio of projects. I'd still like the portfolio of projects to reflect kind of the multiple benefits, but I recognize that more flexibility in the scoring may bring us ultimately a suite of projects that's more effective actually achieving those multiple benefits than the current structure. So those are my thoughts.
Great, thank you so much. I see next up is Councilmember Flynn.
Yeah, thank you very much. Echo most of the comments that Secretary Crowfoot just mentioned. Number two, the linear piece is easier for me. I'm really in favor of that. The number one, the mutual benefit, just don't want to lose the benefits of mutual benefit at the cost of enabling a little more discretion on behalf of staff. And I think staff mentioned and hit it right on the head with discretion comes accountability for the use of that discretion. And beyond just defending that, we need to make sure that it's equitable and doesn't raise these other issues with the competing values that we have with all of our programs. So I think you're right on track. I really, again, appreciate staff's continuous improvement approach across all of these programs. And then taking that back to end users, this process allowing for end user input. And as I've seen over and over and over the years, just staff continuing to take the end user and public input and taking that to heart and using it to continuously improve not just this program, but all of the programs. So kudos to staff. I usually save these comments for the end, but kudos to staff across the board on the meeting. And yeah, I'm in favor of both the approaches, just with the multi-benefit, don't want to lose sight of all of that, the positives that come with that.
Great, thank you. And next up, we have Shireen D'Souza.
Thanks so much, Chair or Deputy Chair. Not sure what the right title is. And I fully agree with the comments that Secretary Crowfoot made. So I'll keep this really short and just want to thank you, Kaylee, for working so closely with CARB staff on a lot of these thorny questions. We fully support SALC staff having the flexibility to assess the multitude of co-benefits from projects in context. So definitely support that, and also support using additional metrics to assess the impact on travel behavior. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And next up is Virginia Jameson.
Hey, thanks, Kaylee, for the great presentation. I couldn't have said it better myself, and thank you for tackling this tricky issue. I think it's really the right time for this conversation. The requirements were getting, very granular and difficult to deal with at the end of that last round there. So I think giving staff the opportunity to kind of look at the portfolio of projects and take a more holistic view of the whole thing, rather than trying to make sure that each and every project has benefits within it, it is going to go a long way to making sure that the portfolio overall captures those benefits that are important to us. Yeah, I wanted to just, reiterate the importance of the prime farmland, and that it tends to be closest into the city and have the highest GHG avoided benefits. And that's really important. And then, as you mentioned, it doesn't have as many of the frills as far as habitat or watershed benefits. And so it's important to balance out those two things in the portfolio. I also wanted to say on the risk portion, I think, one thing to remember about it, and Deputy DeSouza, you probably have had this conversation with Kaylee, is that the way that risk is evaluated in the program is really wrapped up with the quantification methodology. So as you're looking at those factors, there just is going to have to be significant coordination with CARB to figure out, how we quantify those avoided developments if we're looking at things like broadband. So just some notes there. But yeah, thank you for the presentation, and support the direction you're talking about.
Great, thank you. And now next up is Deputy Secretary Sasha Kurgan.
Hi, Deputy Secretary Sasha Kurgan from the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency, filling in for Secretary Castro Ramirez. I am so appreciative of this staff memo because I think it really helped outline some of the real world examples that you're seeing, even if they're hypothetical, but just to really frame up the issue. Like other council members who have already spoken, I just want to reiterate that it seems like program access seems really critical to continue to be able to deploy these funds in the contexts where they are most useful. That's everything. Accessibility here, in my view, is not only awareness of the program, but also in the criteria and in the application. So I really appreciate this tone of bringing in some flexibility on the staff level, providing more options on the scoring to hopefully allow for a range of program projects that still meet the program goals, but also provide space for more, perhaps even diverse projects and geographies served, making sure that we're not missing groups, as we heard from the commenters today. On development risks, as we think about infill development a lot at our agency and in our housing agencies, I love where you're going. I appreciate that the staff understand and acknowledge that these changing development pressures are happening quite quickly. So I'd offer a couple thoughts. It seems valuable to explore some other ideas that some housing researchers explore for development risks outside of linear distance of current urban clusters and things like that. So the project examples in the staff memo, I think, do a good job of highlighting how there are different factors for different contexts that could make development more likely. Broadband access and the proximity to roads were good ones, but you might also consider rising property values and other metrics that signal housing displacement in some of the areas, because that's when folks start to want to go out and developers see that. So that is something that may be useful, and to the extent we can be helpful with research or research relationships that we have, we're certainly here for that conversation. And then last is that we can offer data from the Department of Housing and Community Development, both on the housing elements and also on the annual update to the housing elements. And there's been some significant changes there. So we're not just looking at constructed or permitted units, but also entitlements that kind of signal when development could happen many years down the road. So we're here to provide data as you continue to explore this. And thank you so much for all the staff effort that went into this memo. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much. And next up, we have Deputy Director Starr.
Yeah, thank you, Nuantara. And I won't repeat, I agree with all the comments really pretty much from my fellow council members, and agree with Secretary Crowfoot that we really need to, look to our staff, provide the flexibility and trust that they need to improve the program. And so these suggestions are both fine with us, and it may provide an opportunity too to have a portfolio approach to look at the overall equity benefits, for example, of the portfolio as a whole, and of course the multiple benefits is an important part of that, and potential health benefits could also be considered and weighted in the overall portfolio, because there are important health benefits of preserving natural and working lands, of course, from air, water, healthier soils and crops, resilience to climate, all those things. So anyway, so we think it's a good opportunity to be more flexible and provide additional opportunity to look at other factors as well. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And okay, I see Virginia, you have your hand back up.
Yeah, just had one more comment, which in my conversation with Secretary Ross, she wanted me to check with my colleagues here. And it looks like maybe Darwin or Deputy Musabi disappeared, but we did want to get some perspective from our agency partners on, this idea of the telecommuting having really changed development pressures, and what we could expect in coming years, or whether it was too soon to tell.
Yeah, he did.
Mm-hmm.
He did have to drop for another commitment, but that was something that he had shared at a previous meeting around the kind of this is still very much to be determined in terms of how strong the impact is from the changes in travel patterns. So I think it was a move cautiously, watch closely. We don't know yet. And I think also to his comment was around not overstating the changes at this point, but knowing that there are certainly changes that are happening. Did I sum that up, Nuantara?
Yes, exactly. And I was going to echo that. I think it is something we, at least from the OPR side too, are really watching and trying to get a better handle on, because I don't think that we have got the full kind of breadth of information and data yet to really understand what the impacts are, but something we absolutely want to be tracking and understanding. So yes. Okay, before we wrap this agenda item, I just am going to quickly see if Kaylee E. or Lynn, you have any other comments here, or responses back to council feedback. And then I think we did get one additional public commenter for this item, so we'll go back to that. But Lynn or Kaylee E., I'm going to hand it to you, and then we'll take the last public comment here.
Thank you. I think I just want to express appreciation for the conversation here. Moving these policy conversations forward in the guideline process, I think is an important step to really solidifying the interagency conversations, so that then as the program teams are working with stakeholders and through the quite complicated guideline development process, they've heard from the council and have a bit of a North Star and some guardrails that really help make sure that the strategy of the council is being integrated into the next round of guidelines. So thank you for the feedback and entertaining this new structure, which we're putting in place to really make sure that our guidelines and our programs are reflecting the council desires and strategies.
And I'll just add on to that, given that we're at the end of the hour. So thank you, everybody.
Great, thank you. So Emily, I'm going to hand it to you for public comment.
Yes, thank you so much. And Lois, yep, see that you're getting the 2-minute timer on the screen. So it looks like we have Charlotte Mitchell on the line. She submitted a public comment. So Charlotte, if you'd like to either *9 if you're joining by phone, or unmute yourself on the lower right hand, excuse me, of your screen, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. Just a sound check. Can you hear me all right?
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And I don't want to take too much time. I really apologize to chiming in a little bit late, but I just want to say, obviously, the California Farmland Trust, in which I represent, we have been a strong user of the SALT program for a lot of great ag land conservation throughout the valley, and just appreciate immensely the staff time that has gone into this from the Department of Conservation to really rethink about how to best utilize these funds. I'll stop there. I just want to show my appreciation and really support the efforts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, with that, passing it back to Deputy Director Nuantara.
Great. So I think with that, we will conclude this agenda item and move on to the next item, which I believe is general public comment. So Emily, I think I'm handing it back to you if we have any public comment here.
Yes. So it looks like we have two more. So our first is from Julia Kim, the Local Government Commission. So Julia, if you'd like to either *9 if you're joining by phone, or unmute yourself via Zoom on the right lower right-hand corner of your screen, we'll pull up our 2-minute timer in just a moment here. Oh, it looks like, sorry, apologies, Julia is no longer on. So next I will move to Richard Sadowski from Homefront EJ. Richard, if you'd like to *9 if you're joining by phone, or unmute via Zoom, we'll start your time.
Hi, this is Richard Sadowski from Homefront Environmental Justice, Morro Bay. Thank you for this meeting, and I appreciate the openness and the input that it's hopeful when you have like receptive listeners. And I just wanted to kind of touch base on some of the different challenges with affordable housing. For instance, here in Morro Bay, we have a lot of Homefront EJs, mostly made up with seniors who either rent or have bought here years ago and have a home. And with escalating cost and options of Airbnb and all this other marketing going on, I think that it would be really beneficial to have a program that would support support not only environmental justice, but support also climate science, and maybe have programs where landlords could rent rooms to like a HUD program, where they have stipends where they could rent rooms to citizen scientists or students that are addressing local citizen science issues and climate science issues. And having that kind of a program for also, not only the student, but also landlords that want to rent to, not just for, Airbnb, but rent to help benefit their communities through promoting good climate science in their area. But thanks again, you guys. Appreciate it. You guys, hopeful, a nice hopeful meeting. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much, Richard. So that concludes our public comment, general open public comment. So I think I'm passing it back to Deputy Director Nuantara. Keith, sorry for that waffling.
Thank you. So with that, we will conclude this agenda item. And Matt, you can correct me if I'm out of step, but I think we can conclude this agenda item. And now we will move to the next, which is to adjourn the meeting. So thank you to SGC staff, to the council members and the public for joining us today. And with that, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.